Hello guys, welcome to the channel. Today we are talking about what if Naruto was the Sorcerer Supreme Part 1. Banished for doing his job, Naruto left never to be seen again in the elemental nations. Now years later, Naruto finds his life more interesting as the world's Sorcerer Supreme. See his journey as how he becomes one of Earth's defenders as he fight threats against not only it but also the loves of his lives. If you enjoy the video, please like and subscribe, it will help us make more videos for you. Now let's begin. So this is how my life is gonna be, thought a blonde-haired blue-eyed boy with whisker-like birthmarks on his cheeks as he stared into the wide-open sea. On the sea, after all I did for that village, and this is how they repay me. This boy was none other than Naruto Uzumaki, the Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed Fox who attacked Konoha 13 years ago but was then sealed by the 4th Hokage to PR damage to the village. But in return it damned the boy to a living hell, because for years the boy has been shunned, beaten, chased and sometimes even tortured, beat up with knives and every form of abuse thought possible. All he wanted was recognition, but nobody in the village gave him the time except for a few, and even then it wasn't enough. Once he became a ninja he thought it them that he was somebody, but for the most part it also wasn't enough, even though he did what the village asked him for. From defending the village against the San, retrieving one of the Sannin Tsunade to become the next Hokage, and even to retrieve the traitor Sasuke Uchiha who defected to Orochimaru. After all that, the council decided to banish him for a stupid reason such as hurting the last Uchiha and using the Kyuubi's power, and is because of that he was in right now. He looked at his hand and saw the seal the council placed on him, so right now he can't use any hand sign. He thought back to what happened once the council screwed him over. He still remember how Tsunade looked sad at how it went as she felt helpless to save her pseudo-son, the look Jiraiya gave the council as he was forced to put the most importantly he remembered the look some of his friends gave him. The ones that actually care for him were Shikamaru, Chuji, Hinata, Tenten, Shino, and the senseis of Team 8, 9 and 10 along with Anko and Yugao. Even after the sea announced to the whole village about his status and told everyone there that he will be banished from the village tomorrow. The rest treated him like the villagers. Kiba insulted him saying that he couldn't have won without the Kyuubi's help. The same could be said about Niji, while the FA Sakura just told him off about how they hurt their Sasuke, and Lee just followed what Sakura was saying. He didn't know about Kakashi since that person didn't even check up on his well-being. And so he couldn't take it anymore, so in one final attempt at defiance, he decided to get away from the village in the dark of night, not giving the people the satisfy him off, which he did, and he ran and ran until he reached the first place he ever visited outside of the village, which was Wave Country. He was happy when he reached there and saw the people prosper after the fall of Gato. He managed to reach Tazuna's house, and when they saw him, they were both happy that he was here. After a while they had dinner, which was delicious in Naruto's mind. Tenzuna then asked Naruto why he was here, and so he told them sadly. Once he finished his tale, the family of three was both shocked and furious at how the village treated someone like him who risked his life to return a traitor, and thanks he gets. After calming down for a while, Tsunami went to hug Naruto in an effort to comfort him, which he was glad for. Later Naruto asked if there was a plaque since he didn't want to bother Tenzuna, who frowned a little at what he said, but he complied with him as Naruto then left them with a heartfelt goodbye before going else, and that's where he was right now, on a cliffside, as he looks down at the scroll he had on his lap. Said scroll as the very same scroll he stole from the Hokage and learned the shadow clone Justu. He smirked for a bit at how he stuck it to Konoha by stealing the scroll that was supposedly guarded by the best. He snorted about their best, but he didn't care right now as he opened up to see what else he could learn from the scroll. What he saw though was something interesting, as he saw what seemed to be a teleportation seal, but the writing was slightly torn at some of the crucial parts. But willing to sate his curiosity, he decided to try it out. He then started to do the hand signs for it all. Let it be said that Naruto Uzumaki is one stubborn kid, as despite him from letting chakra to disperse through his fingers, he still tried to force it all through brute force and sheer will as he tried to use every ounce of his chakra. He even resorted to use the Kyuubi's chakra as the red shroud of the fox's chakra covered his entire body, and there the fox's corrosive chakra somehow made SMA noticeable cracks on the seals, but something else happened as the overload of chakra there made something resonated within the scroll as all of a sudden a bright P before him, and it was then he was suddenly pulled into it, and just like that any trace of Naruto Uzumaki was gone, and that is where his new life began. New York. It was a tranquil night in the city of New York as a couple were walking down the streets arm in arm as the woman leaned her head on the man's shoulder while the New York night. It was then when they passed an alley did something strange happen as a portal opened up, and from there the two could see a child no more than dropped out from it along with an object. Seeing this, the woman quickly headed towards the boy as she rolled him over and checked him once over. It was then the bee opened his, and from there she sighed in relief as she asked the boy, "Oh my God, are you all right?" Naruto opened his eyes to see two people looking at him with worry. One of them was a woman with brown hair tied into a ponytail that reached her back and sapphire blue eyes that could shine even in the dark. She was wearing a mo with a palm tree on it along with a long skirt with flower patterns on it. The other was a guy with short black hair with brown eyes, and he was wearing a sleeveless shirt with a blue shorts. "Yeah, I'm all right," said Naruto as he got up and dusted himself off, which made the couple sigh in relief before the man started asking him something. "So kid, what are you doing all alone out here? Where's your parents?" I don't have any. "I'm an orphan," said Naruto, which made the couple widen their eyes in shock at what they were hearing, and they had to ask, "What? Then what out here? Shouldn't you be in an orphanage or something?" Which made Naruto be even sadder as was noticed by the two, so they look at each other as if we're sharing conversation until they both nodded and said, "Would you like to come with us for a bit, child?" Naruto looked at them in shock at what they were saying and had to ask, "Really? I don't mean to be rude, don't worry about it. How about we take you up for a checkup to see if you're fine?" "Okay kid," said the man while the wife just smiles at him. Naruto thought about it, nodding as he walked with them. "My name's Naruto." "What's your statabeo?" said Naruto, and the couple chuckled a little at his verbal tick. "Well, my name is Jonathan Strange and this is my wife Martha." "So Naruto, are you willing to entertain this old couple?" said Jonathan as Naruto smiled a little and teased his life, not knowing the changes he will bring onto himself and others. Years later, Avengers Mansion. In this very place was the home to Earth's mightiest heroes who for every day of their lives dedicated themselves into saving the world and beyond from any and all threaten the lives of the innocent. Right now though they were in a meeting among the members as they talk about something that concerns about their safety of the mansion. Among them were Iron Man, Wasp, Thor, Black Panther, Hawkeye, Ant-Man, Ms. Marvel, and the Hulk. Captain America was the one who started off first as he said, "Well, now that we're all here we have to start off with the security of the mansion being once again our enemies, and mainly because we don't truly have the means to counter them." Iron Man groaned for a bit as he said, "Come on Cap. I just haven't found the right frequency for the hocus pocus that's been all the rage lately, especially Blondie's girlfriend." Thor grimaced for a bit at the reminder of his stalker, so to speak, as he said, The Enchantress is one of the very few formidable foes due to her extensive mystical arts." Hearing a snort, everyone there turned to Iron Man, who said, "Oh come on Thor. Sure, I won't deny a lot of stuff that we have faced, but really I just need some time to least a way to make sure she can't come in here anymore." Hawkeye decided to quip in as he said, "Really, and how close were you again exactly?" Stark, not wanting to have a fight break out, Captain America decides to step in as he said, "Enough Hawkeye, that's not what we're here for." Seeing the two back off, Sly continued on, "Look Tony. You are one of the smartest guys I know, but in this case we might need someone who's a little more knowledgeable in using, well, magic, least until you can find a way on your own." "Okay." Tony folded his arms and then mumbled something under his breath, which made the first Avenger shake his head a little at how he was acting as he steered the CONV to the topic. "All right then. For the most part we'll need someone who's well versed in the mystical world, so Thor, do you have anyone in mind?" He looks on at the Norse god, who seemed to contemplate his thoughts for a moment, but it was then though Hawkeye decided to speak out. "No need for that, Goldie, have someone in mind." Now all eyes turned to look at Hawkeye, who was tapping something on the computer, and then all of a sudden a picture appeared before them which made everyone Captain America asked, "Who is this?" From there, Hawkeye had to adopt a sheepish look on his face as he told them of who the man was. Manhattan. New York, in a tranquil house in the middle of Manhattan was one man lying quite comfortably on his chair with a book in hand, and nearby on a table was a cup of tea with a was floating in mid-air as the teapot gently landed back onto the table. Said man had blonde hair that matched the sun itself, tied into a thin and straight ponytail reaching just past his shoulders with bang just passing his right eye. He reading glasses as he wore a black coat with red markings adorning it, with the inside being a blue shirt that reach his hands. On his neck is a golden necklace with writing on it. The cup then levitated for a bit as the man then held both the cup and the saucer with his hands, while the book that was once in his hand was now floating in mid-sip of his tea. While reading it he kept on reading for a bit until he had a smile on his face as two arms were wrapped around his neck as a woman put her chin on his shoulder and she said to him, "I working quite hard today, dear." The book then slowly closed and then gently put down by invisible hands as the man set his teacup near it before he turned to her. The woman had white shoulder long blue eyes stare back at him lovingly as the two shared a kiss that lasted for a few moments before the two ended it abruptly. The white-haired woman had to pout, said, "Great. The nosy archer is back, and from the looks of it, he's brought some friends." The blonde male chuckled for a bit as he kisses her on the tip of her nose before he got loose from her grip and started to walk towards the doors. He didn't even nay door with his hands as the wooden doors opened up magically as he put his hands behind his back while he looked on at the group with a slight amuse and confused low as he said out loud, well, look what the cat drag in. What's the matter, little archer? You and the widow along with that one-eyed pirate didn't get the message? Oh, a repeat of what happened and you threatened my family." He took great pride as seeing the blonde-haired archer shake his head in fear, which earned a look of confusion among his friends and teammates. He chuckled for AB Archer's antics before he waved his arm out as he said, "Well then, why don't you all come on in and we'll talk inside." From there, Hawkeye along with Iron Man, Captain America, Ms. Marvel and Thor entered the house as the others were back in the mansion in case something show inside, though was quite something for some of the Avengers as the interior looked like something out of a Victorian mansion, which in a way was true considering close to a two-story mansion with enough places to house plenty of people. All of them entered what could be the living room as the Avengers sat on a couch with doing the same on the opposite side. It was then though an Asian man made himself known as he put down a tray of snacks and drinks on the table between them. Somewhere else for a moment the room went a little silent for a few seconds before Captain America started off first. "Sorry about intruding like this, but we need to talk to you." Raising an eyebrow, the blonde male seemed curious as he asked them, "Oh, and what would the Avengers want with me?" Not missing a beat, Captain America then answered him, "Well, we need your expertise so to speak when it comes to magic, considering that we don't have anyone understands magic. Thor might be able to, but he's not as well versed when it comes down to it, so we were discussing about having someone who knows about mag there." Hawkeye says that you are the expert when it comes down to it. The blonde male seemed to hum for a bit as he said to them, "So basically you want my help when it comes to the supernatural." Seeing him nod, he then continued on, "Why me though? I mean you do have a god who might know a few buddies who is probably just dying to come here wooden this time." Though it was Thor who answered him, "Aye, but among my comrades in arms, very few are well versed in the mystic arts, with Loki and Enchantress being uses the mystic art in combat and only surpassed by those like Odin, so we have come to you." As Barton said that you are a sorcerer, it was then though a small smirk appeared on the blonde's face as he said, "Well, you've come to the right place. Where's my manners? I forgot to introduce myself. Nah, the Sorcerer Supreme." The Avengers minus Hawkeye all look at him with an eyebrow raised as Iron Man said, "That's quite a claim you have there. Think you can back that up?" Hawkeye flinched slightly about what Iron Man said as all of a sudden, the teapot was levitating right before their very eyes as it went and filled the cups until all was gently put down, and from there it was the cups' turn to levitate as all of them went into the hands of everybody there except for Naruto, who had his just hover face before he took a sip from it. All without his hand physically touching the cup as his floated back to the table with a small smirk on his face as he saw some of tea from the Avengers as though he was saying proof enough for you. Despite that, Iron Man was a little apprehensive as he said, "Yeah, well, good party trick. Guess you can do some of that mumbo jumbo, so what's your answer again?" Naruto had to raise his eyebrow as he said to him, "I don't know. I mean, I do have a lot of stuff on my hands considering I am part of a council that oversees situations in regards to the supernatural world, and that's not counting my Rouge Gallery, who consists of anyone and everyone from vampires to demon lords and gods that throws a hissy fit from time to time. This time it was Thor who was a little intrigued as he said, "You say that you are an overseer, but I have not heard of you before until today." Not missing a beat, the blonde sorcerer answered him, "Ah. Yes. Well, considering that you and the Avengers usually handle problems if they came from your world, it wasn't necessary as you all usually handle it before I was needed." Seeing that, the Avengers thought about it for a bit before realizing that they do usually finish any mess made from Thor's rouges, and then all of them nodded. See, right before Captain America said to him, "If you're worried about extra workload, then how about you just become a part-time Avenger? You come from time to time meetings if needed, or if we want your expertise when it comes to the mystic world." The first Avenger noticed the blonde sorcerer thinking about it for a few moments before he said, "How about this? Why don't I check out your place and see how is it, and discuss it from there?" Captain America thought about it before he nodded as he said, "Sure, we'll pick you up here tomorrow and we'll discuss it from there." The two then shake hands for a bit before the Avengers headed back in their jet. Halfway through though, Ms. Marvel had to ask Hawkeye, "So Clint, how did you know anyways?" She notices the flinch Clint had as he shivered for a bit as he remembered the last meeting he had with the Sorcerer Supreme with his partner by his side, which the never speak off again, as he answered her, "Trust me, you so do not want to know how that happened." With Naruto night time, the door opened up to see our blonde protagonist as he wore a pajama bottom while wiping his hair dry with a towel. Using his magic to make the towel disappear, his super king-size bed that was actually big enough to fit 4 people comfortably, and in that bed was the white-haired woman who wore a silky purple see-through. She lay on the bed with one arm propped up on her head as she lay on her side, making a very sexy scene. Near the blonde had a smile on his face as he climbed to tea her on the lips. The two battle with their tongues while their hands roam all over each other's bodies, rubbing each other as Naruto slowly but surely started to dominate the kiss. Woman squirm under him for a bit before he ended the kiss with a small trail of saliva connecting them as the woman spoke first. "Are you sure about this? I mean, tend to attract plenty of trouble and I don't need their luck in attracting them rub off on you. Creator knows that you need any more rouges to add to your list." The blonde chuckled for a bit as he pecked her on the lips before he answered her, "Don't worry, Clea. If any I say it's them that hopes that my luck when it comes to bad off on them." This time though it was Clea who giggled at what he said as she wrapped her arms over his neck before pulling him down into another searing kiss that last for quite. Voice came out saying, "Mao, I can't believe you guys started doing this without me." The two ended the kiss and turned to see another woman in the doorway. The woman had free-flowing waist, long scarlet red hair with a very generous bust with an hoe and a tight ass in tandem made a body that men would drool over for, as she wore a black thigh-high red kimono with what looked like golden tails adorning it with around the chest area to show off her impressive bust. All three looked at each other for a moment before a small grin was etched onto Clea's face as she beckoned the redhead as she said, "Don't worry. I'm sure our dear husband both of us and then some, right dear?" The Sorcerer Supreme couldn't help but chuckle at the antics of his two wives as the redhead climbed onto the bed as the three shared a three-way kiss as the bed grew close by itself. As the night goes on, shock, surprise and fear, these were the mixed range of emotions that Negi, Asuna and Setsuna were feeling at the moment as they saw what could be described as beatdown from the man known to the world of the supernatural as the greatest sorcerer to date. Said sorcerer though was just standing calmly right before them with a sakazuki in hand, swirling the drink slightly with a bottle of sake floating nearby. On his left, who was still unconscious and laid down upon an invisible chair. If the way she was sitting in midair was any indication, the kidnappers on the other hand looked as though they went 10 rounds with a typhoon and barely just survive. The monkey summoner was knocked out with Sui as her clothing and body had cuts, bruises and welts, with her summons disappearing into the wind. The swordswoman was just if only more worse than the Sumo to use what was left of her swords to even kneel upright. Lastly was the boy, and despite any physical wounds on his body, the effects are still there as his clothes had cuts, burn patches, as the boy was on his knee with his haggard from the fig. Ting as the area around them looked like World War III happened as spikes of earth were everywhere and all around had slash marks, crate puddles as though a heavy rainfall happened yet there was barely a cloud in the sky. The boy may be breathing haggardly but his face was still devoid of any emotions as in his mind he knew that he was outmatched by the monster before him who bar-winded. Even more so as he saw the Sorcerer Supreme taking a sip of his drink without a care in the world and not bothering to look at his opponents like they were. If the boy could feel genuine emotions at the moment, he would have shouted something obscene or charged in head first at the lack of respect the blonde was not that kind of person as he knew that despite the one-sided beatdown the three of them receive, it would have been nothing as he figured out that the blonde back and it with them as they are now would be a miracle if they could even scratch him. With that in mind the boy did the only thing possible in this situation. He fled the area with his associates in hand as all of them were suddenly teleported elsewhere, remaining people there with three looking on in both shock and fear while one was still knocked out and the man responsible for forcing them to leave calmly take his sake before turning back to the three with a cheery smile on his face as he said to them, "Well then. Looks like the fun's over so let's head back to the inn." The three could only nod mechanically as the blonde sorcerer led them back with Kanoka floating next to them on her invisible chair still knocked out despite the INTE mere moments ago. Next day, looks like the boya managed to inherit his danger magnet real quickly now, said a somewhat chipper Evangeline and next to her was Shakamaru looks on at the red-head kid teacher along with Nodoka trying and failing to confess her love. The vampire had a good chuckle out of it seeing the antics. Another chuckle sounded which made her turn to see Naruto standing next to her with an amused smile on his face before answering the vampire, "True, that just will go far," giving her own smirk. Evangeline just looks towards the antics before she said him, "You know, I never would have thought that someone of your caliber would both assignment such as this yourself. I know the Magistar Magi Supreme is quite busy with her own stuff but surely she would have some of her subordinates to handle." All she got was a shrug in return as he said to her, "Maybe, but then again I have a serious doubt that anyone under her could do with this kind of job that doesn't level property damage and headaches that no one could spare and believe me I know. I've met all of them." The vampire looks back at him for a few moments before she and Shakamaru starts to walk off into another direction to find something to do while Naruto looks on few more moments before he sighed and walked off to do his own thing. After the trip was back to the inn again as Naruto walked into the hot springs with a towel covering his waist, looking in front of him. He saw Negi who seemed to be about something so being the caring guy he was and just for the sake of teasing the poor boy he made himself known well that was he was going to do until he felt a wave of emotion that was filled with happiness and giddiness, making him curious a little at who was giving out SUC so with a quick mind-reading spell he found the culprit. After learning of the person's intention made the Sorcerer Supreme giving his vulpine grin as his inner pran fire in his mind and seeing how would this turn out so with stealth that would make most assassins proud. He slid into the water without making a sound to alert the two of his presence before he lightly conjure a paw bottle and sakazuki in it as he waited for the show to happen. The whole thing lasted for 5 minutes but it was probably the best 5 minutes he's had and it was due to his years of meditation training that didn't made him low but it did made him chuckle. Letting the two people plus one ermine know that they were not alone. Naruto could see the kid close to having a mental breakdown as the student named Asakura if he remembered right. He gave the kid a fake sympathetic shake of mock scold him a little saying, "This is the so-called child prodigy, TSK, Tisk I need to make a pit stop in England before heading back so I could ask just how they because if they count you as one then I seriously need to change my views upon the world again." He smirked a little the moment he looked down so they could see it but he knew that Negi was close to freaking out. His point was proven as in a burst of speed Negi wa of him bawling his eyes out crying, "Please Naruto-sama. Please forget everything I don't want to turn into an ermine wah." It was only because of Naruto using his powers to suppress Negi's own prevented the boy from letting his magic go berserk as the redhead cried his eyes out into Sorcerer Supreme from telling the association about his screw-up instead of placating the boy though. The prankster in him just couldn't help but tease him even more as he added fuel to the fire saying in mock thought, "Oh? And mean sure making Miss Kazumi forget about magic would be simple for me but what would I get in return? Did you forget one of the few rules of the Superna that nothing is free and everything is give and take, so what do you have would be enough to pay for my services. That made the redhead cry even more as the ermine just had his jaw dropped and eyes wide at how the blonde just dismiss his Aniki like that, but before he could though was when Asakura made herself known with a mic and phone in hand and channeling her inner reporter she said to him, Naruto-sensei, are you also a mag-sensei too, deciding to humor the ecstatic girl. Naruto created a small humanoid creature made of water about the size of a can drink hopped into the pail before it took the sake into the sakazuki, and to make it even more convincing he made the creature splash onto the girl's face, making her sputter a little before she shakes or gets some of the water out. Looking back, she saw the so-called sensei in training looking at her with a grin on his face that says, "What do you think?" in a somewhat cocky tone, but she didn't see as she was about to say something to him, but she was cut off when her phone suddenly broke into pieces. She was shocked for a few moments before she turned back to chuckling Naruto, who said to her, "Now that you've had your fun, it would be prudent that you keep quiet about this, Miss Kazumi, or there would be consequences." She narrowed her eyes challengingly at the Sorcerer Supreme before she said to him, "There will be no consequences to high for me, and nothing in this world will PR getting my big scoop, so come on Naruto-sensei. Help a girl out a little, I mean from the way Negi was acting. You seem to be a big shot, so I'm sure you can show right." The blonde sorcerer looked at her with an amused look on his face at her determination, but he knew firsthand how the supernatural world works, and so he decided to with a strict no. Seeing her jaw drop a little, he went ahead to elaborate, "This is not some war-torn world where you have a form of a shaky immunity on hand. This is a cruel world. Wrong move could end not only your life but also the lives of others like young Negi here. Rules state that if he reveal the world of magi without consent from the Law Association, then by law he will be punished by being turned into an animal, and for what? Being a circus act so you could be famous." He saw her jaw clapped up real tight at the revelation. He didn't want to do this, but it was either giving her a dose of reality of the supernatural world or act out the turning Negi into an animal and wiping out the memories of everyone involved. Minus the teacher's give or take. He didn't stop there as he said to her, "You're lucky that the London's branch changed their ways half a decade ago, because if they didn't then you, your friends, even you dog will be killed on sight, and you know the worst part is, they'll just covered it up with some bullshit and everyone within a week will have forgotten your existence." That was it. As he saw her swallowed a lump in her throat as she was getting the idea on just how the way their world works. Seeing that he got through her head, "Look. I get why you're doing this, but you should know just how dangerous being a reporter is, right? I mean, look at New York, supervillains coming out of the wood, superheroes fighting them, which in turn cause a lot of damage to the city if albeit unintentionally." Seeing her fidget a little made him knew that he was getting his point across. He hated doing stuff like this, but curiosity like that and nothing to back her up was a combination when she finds something she shouldn't, and the troubles that would happen because of it. Seeing that he made his point, he got up from his seat and started to head for the doors, not looking back as the Sorcerer Supreme let the girl to think about what, while later, sitting on the balcony of his room, Naruto basked in the sights of the place he was in as the moon illuminates the area with a glow which made the blonde sorcerer's scenery. It was then though his eye rise in curiosity as he saw Negi along with Asuna and Setsuna out doing their patrols, as he suddenly got a vision of another Negi suddenly appeared and Asakura hosting a kissing competition. What was interesting thought was that she also added him into the competition, which made him curious considering he knew why she and the ermine were doing the ermine didn't know that he could break the contract, as he pleased along with the magic circle the ermine placed on the building. He wanted to, but for some reason wanted to, either just for the heck of it or he wanted to mess with the teens a little since he was also on shift tonight to watch the students, so he figured that I'd as well enjoy for a bit since stuff like this don't happen often. He used his mastery of the shadows to find out who was going to participate. He hummed a little when he figured out the contestants, whereas from Group 1 were the Chui, the resident ninja and martial artist, from Group 3 was the Shota-loving president and the shut-in. Group 4 sent out the gymnast, and surprisingly the mercenary. Group 5 was a no-brainer as the two best friends went together, but the last group was what made him interested, as Evangeline and her partner decided to have in this kind of situation he would have used the shadows to tell him who was where so he could avoid them, but in this case he decided to let the girls have some cha get him, so he suppressed his sensory to the participants only as he walked the hallways of the inn. It didn't take Longed for him to meet the first group, which was probably the one that might give him a warm-up, as he saw Keed and Ku Fei right before him. He didn't, as he knew why they were here, as he said to them, "I take it you guys want to see how good I am, right?" The two combatants nodded, with Ku Fei getting into her stance as she said to him, "Yes, Aru. Keed said you were strong, Aru, so I want to challenge you with my one Chinese Kempo, Aru." The blonde had to chuckle a little at the girl's dedication to fight strong people, so he decided he should return it in kind as he said to her, "Well then, please treat me." Put his left into a fist with the knuckles touching the palm of his right hand in a gesture for martial artists to understand, where Ku Fei returned the gesture a little. Sudden she appeared right in front of him in a burst of speed in a roundhouse kick towards his face. The blonde calmly leaned back from the kick before thrusting his hand down to intercept the follow-up punch, and once more tilting his head back to dodge the upper Q by using his entire right side to push Ku Fei off him. The girl manages to realign herself in mid-air before landing into a crouch position when all of a sudden gunshots rang out through the hallways. Her eyes widen as Sensei in training leaped to the roof and somehow hanging from it, using his feet for a few moments before she looked in front to see Mana with her guns in hand point. She then saw Keed jumping towards Naruto into a kick, where the blonde countered with a block with his arm before using the arm to grab her leg and through her rig, who leapt out of the way while Keed landed on her feet. Naruto landed right behind her, making her lash out with a roundhouse kick, but that was blocked once more before the girl was sent skidding back to the three. Looked at each other for a moment as a silent agreement was made among them as all of them charged right at him. Keed was the first to reach him as she threw a hail of shurikens from her kimono. Seeing them, the blonde effortlessly dodged the hail before using his foot to block Keed manages to get behind him, but she could barely attack as Naruto pushed Ku Fei back using his leg while spinning his body into a roundhouse kick, making the kick before the blonde sorcerer jumped back to dodge the bullets fired at him by Mana. He put both his arms up so he could block an axe kick by Ku Fei as he then push her off him, so both of his hands grab onto two punches made by two Keeds, the little. As he saw a very similar move that he knew a long time ago, as a third Keed was above him with a flying kick towards his head. Seeing the attack, he pushes the two in front of him aside so he could sidestep the kick before flipping backwards as Mana tried to shoot at him again before grab Fei's leg, who tried to blindside him, and then he threw her right into Keed, who manages to catch her while three of her clones went to attack Naruto. The blonde leapt right behind Mana, who barely manages to put her hands up in an X formation just so she could block the punch from him. That sent her skidding. He fended of the clones easily enough, but it was then though his senses told him to duck, and instinctively he did as a rocket fist sailed past his head, missing it by me as he got back up to look behind him to see Evangeline and Shakamaru standing right behind him with the vampire having a smirk on her face. He knew what she wanted, but he couldn't help but quip it out loud, "So I take it you want in on this, Eva-chan?" All he got was a smirk on the vampire's face, which made him have his own as he patted his kimono for a bit, dusting off some dust a little as he said to them, "Well, I'll have to get a little serious then." An hour later. "Ha ha 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 ha, oh my god, Hank, I can't believe you did that," said a laughing Kitty as she was close to falling off her chair after yet another hilarious story about Naruto's days in college. Alexia's training ended a little while ago, and said girl was now playing with Shizuka in her room, showing all of her stuff as the two spend time together. Professor Xavier and Logan had something else to do, so they left after seeing the training, and that just leaves our protagonist, Kitty, Hank and Aurora, all of whom around the table sipping tea as Naruto told the two of the adventures he and Hank had back when they met in college. Aurora was having a fit of giggles after hearing the latest of their stories, while Hank and Naruto reminiscence about it and also followed in on the laughter. The two friends could catch up on the times for a while as Naruto told tales of his adventures as the Sorcerer Supreme, while Hank told his story about his time as men. Needless to say, the two talked as though they still kept in touch with each other, with the way they were chatting with each other in the eyes of Kitty and Aurora. On calm down for a bit, Aurora decided to say to the two men, "I can't believe that you would do something like that, Hank. What would your students think if they hear more interesting times in your college days?" The blue-furred mutant just shrugged his shoulder as he answered her. "Bobby and Evan would probably ask me for some tips along with more of the mischievous the rest would have their jaws drop in either shock or surprise." That brought about another fit of chuckles from the people. there as they enjoy the scenery around them. Hank then said to Naruto, "So Naruto, what does your job anyways? I mean, with a title like Sorcerer Supreme there must be some benefits." He could hear the slight teasing tone in his voice which made the blonde smirk slightly before he answered him, "Some cases it's fine, but believe me, dealing with the like dealing with brats, and don't let their ages tell you otherwise, because even then I could count the amount of people I know on one hand that actually acts their little brats having temper tantrum when they don't get what they want. It makes me want to tear my head off every time I have to deal with some of them." The three X-Men could see the frustration coming out from the blonde sorcerer, and they could help but feel a slight pity for him as they could see that it could be TRO before anyone else could say anything else. A portal suddenly opened up near them, making the three X-Men there tense up and got into their battle stance as they what might come out from there, while Naruto raised his eyebrow in curiosity as he recognized the magic signature. Who walked out of there though was something the three X-Men did not expect, because who walked out of there was a person. Said person was a girl that has VE pastel yellow blonde hair that reaches down to her feet with a single lock pointing upwards, large green eyes that appear to have no irises, peachy skin and a sly build. The girl wore a frilly, pink layered robe with a red ribbon tied in a bow around her neck. Around the chest are 3 blue diamond patterns with 2 blue trian. Each series of these is outlined in a hot pink. She wears wing-like adornments around her ears and small hoop earrings. She also seems to prefer going barefoot as doesn't wear any shoes. The three X-Men were confused as to who it was, but it was when they heard Naruto call out to her did they realize that he knew her. Seeing the blonde male, the girl towards him before stopping just right in front of him as she said, "Hey Naruto, how's it going?" Shaking his head with a smile on his face, the Sorcerer Supreme gave her a warm smile as he answered her, "Well enough Mavis, so what brings you here?" The now named Mavis now had a somewhat sheepish look on her face as she scratched the back of her head, which Naruto knew that she wanted something as he sigged before saying, "Come on Mavis, really, what is it this time?" Mavis pouted a little at the accusation, but she didn't deny it as she said to him, "Come on Naruto. You know that Japan has the highest rate of supernatural occur in America being a close second nowadays, so you of all people should know how hectic it is with the workload." Pinching the bridge of her nose, the blonde sorcerer said to her, "And you of all people should know that I don't just handle Earth itself but I also practically handled practically every dimension related to the supernatural, and the only saving grace is that people like you would help with the load, but in the end I still have a few Joby checked out soon, and believe me these need to be properly looked at considering who I'm supposed to be handling." She quickly went into puppy dog mode as she said to him, "Please. Come on, this is important and I can't do it because I have a meeting with the Alvarez Empire, anybody from my guild, because they tend to, well, you know." Again that brought about a comical sweat drop from Naruto. He knew who was in her guild and their tendency to overdo it. Even more so that they have no idea of tea back, nor do they know how to talk that involve destroying things with whatever they have in hand and form. What he could tell on the girl's face, he knew that this W situation again. The blonde groaned as he knew that he was needed once again. Sure, being Sorcerer Supreme had its perk that almost no one could ta. Kuyuan, but the job itzy as the title goes, he has to handle any situation should the need arise where the people there couldn't handle it. At the very least he has to hear her out first before he decides. "Tell me what it is first." Seeing that he was willing to hear her out, Mavis quickly said to him, "Okay, this is mainly about the tension between the Western mages and Eastern mages in Joppa." Seeing him nod grimly, she continued on, "Well, Kanuman decided to let one of his teachers to give a letter pertaining about a way to end the tension between the guys of a school trip." Raising an eyebrow, Naruto couldn't help but ask, "What's so wrong about that? I'm sure Kanuman's staff could handle it, right?" Noticing the way she looked elsewhere, he dreaded to know the answer as Mavis said to him, "If it was Takahata then I would worry you about this, but well, they decided to use his newest member of the staff to do it. Alone mostly." Once more the blonde had to sweat drop at how irresponsible the principal was as he asked, "Who?" "Negi Springfield." The moment she said that name, The Sorcerer Supreme stared at her for a few good seconds, which unnerved her a little before the blonde slowly closed his eyes for a long sigh before he said to her, "Are you sure you can't spare anyone that could do this or even handle that Alvarez problem of yours?" Seeing the girl shake her head made the blonde sorcerer groan at the situation for a bit. He looks back to see the 3 X-Men members looking back at him in confusion, wave them off saying, "Sorry, it's my job, so I would have our tea time cut short as I will probably be gone for a while." Seeing that it was quite important, Hank said to him, "No worries, old friend, I know how it is, as I do have my own problems to handle here, but I must ask, what abo yours that's playing with Alexia right now?" Naruto quickly answered the guy without missing a beat as he said, "She wants to stay for a bit. I do hope that it's no connivance." The 3 look at each other for a bit before Aurora decided to answer him, "Not at all. I'm sure Alexia would love to have her stay for a bit longer." That made him have a sigh of relief for a bit before he turned his sights back to Mavis, who was looking at the ground where she started to play the grass with her food. She knew that she owed him big time. Even more so when the incompetence came from her own territory and she needed his help in dealing with it. So without a word, Naruto stood up and then created a portal after waving goodbye to the 3 X-Men members as he along with Mavis entered it, Mahora Academy headmaster's office. In the office of this very room was one Kono Kanuman who for some reason felt a cold dread down into the very core of his soul, but he also knew why it was. Remember the job he gave to his newest staff member, Negi Springfield, the son of the Thousand Master that wants to follow his dream of finding his father. Sure, a job such as this might be a little hard on the kid, but in thought that he might be able to handle it, even more so that his class has a few that could back him up should the need arise. But he knew that he was going to GE, and as though fate herself was showing her hate towards him, a portal suddenly opened up right before him. He would have tense and got ready for a fight if it walked out that portal. His eyes widened slightly as the old man was slowly starting to sweat as 2 of the world's most powerful magic users were here in his office, and looks from Naruto. He knew that he was going to get it. He tried to hide the lump in his throat as Mavis looked at him with a face that said, "You're on your own," before she quickly disappeared, leaving him behind with the S Supreme, who took a seat before him with eyes bearing deep into his soul as he brought a leg over the other before putting both his elbows on the armrest and inte fingers as the blonde said in a very chilling tone, "So Kono, let's talk about this so-called school trip of yours." That's when he knew that he screwed up somehow as he swallowed the lump in his throat before getting the talk of a lifetime. Elsewhere, walking down the hallways of the train station was one very chipper Negi Springfield. As every step he takes had a small skip in his step as the 10-year-old thought ever school trip with his students, but even more so that he thought about the mission that the headmaster gave him. He hummed a happy tune as he got ready for his students to come by. It took a while, but about an hour or so later he took in the students' head count until the last only 2 members in a group. He had a slight dilemma as he said to the 2, Setsuna-san, Zazie-san, why don't I put you into other groups, is that all right with you?" Setsuna was about to nod until a familiar voice said out to them, "Oh ho, no need for that, Negi-kun." It seemed that Eva-chan and Shakamaru could make it after all. Turning, the young Magister Magi in training saw the headmaster, but he looked a little worse for wear as the old man was panting a little, and next to him was one McDowell the Dark Witch along with her aide Shakamaru. The person next to him though was one that he would recognize instantly as he saw Naruto's strange, the Sorcerer Supreme in a stunning business suit walking. Redhead swallowed a lump in his throat a little as he knew about the man before him who was probably the strongest mage, or his title implied, and the boy knew was wrong if someone of his caliber was with him. And as though they were reading his mind, the blonde decided to answer him, "Don't worry, kiddo, I'm here to make sure that you and your students will be safe. After certain someone would willingly put his charges, where one of them is his granddaughter, into a dangerous environment with some backup. Now would he?" The sarcasm was laying it on thick, but the boy didn't seem to get it as he tilted his head a little in confusion, though the others there got the hint if the wince that T or the smirk on Evangeline's face was any indication, as the vampire was absolutely giddy at how she could finally leave the damn school. Despite it being only temp, wasn't going to waste this chance to experience stuff outside of it. It took a while, but the moment that Naruto stepped into the train, he was quickly swarmed by a horde of students who started questions left and right about who h funny for the blonde sorcerer as he calmed them down for a bit, which took quite a bit before he then introduced himself. Hello there, my name is Naruto S. Strange and I am a teacher in learning, so the reason I am on this trip is so I could see how my senpais handle a trip like this. FO reference. It managed to deflate some of the students in hoping that he would be their teacher, but that didn't deter them as they dragged him to ask an assortment of questions. Side were Negi and Asuna, with the latter talking to her teacher about their newest member on this trip. Oi Negi, who is that guy over there? Another mage like you? The red-head mage in training nodded for a bit before he answered his student. Yeah, but he's a little more than just that, seeing her raise an eyebrow. Negi continued on in a hush whisper, he's mastered every mystic arts in the world today, from Celtic runes to Shinto magic, and is also creating at least a dozen original magic styles and has trained at least 6 more mages that are always ranked in the top 50. He could now see the gears turning in Asuna's mind while the red-head 10-year-old kept on talking. Not only that, but he's probably the strongest mystic user in EXI, able to take on gods, demon lords, true monsters and everything in between. Asuna swallowed a lump in her throat as she was hearing just how powerful the blonde was as Negi kept on listing his accomplishment until she had enough and just shut with her hand. It was enough for the kid to get the message as they tried to talk about other things elsewhere in the train, though was someone else who was sweating up a storm at the presence of the blonde as her mind was going into overdrive. Shit, what the hell is he doing here? I can't do what I want now if he of all people is here. I don't have the power to take a monster like him. God damn it. Shit, I have to distract it, or at least try and drag those brats out all alone. Unknown to her though, her own shadow behind her was watching this event as a red eye stared deeply into her very soul without her knowing it was ever there, as back into the abyss of the shadows among the students though, 3 of which decided to also have their own conversation. So, what do you two think about the new person? Degazaru said a very curious kid as she eyed Naruto, who was playing cards with some of her classmates. WH2 near her also eyed the blonde until Mana answered her, if he's here then we shouldn't worry too much. After all, only fools or suicidal ones would mess with Sam. Setsuna just stare at him for a few more moments before she gave her own answer. It doesn't matter. As long as he doesn't hurt Ojo-sama, then I don't mind his like that. All 3 did nothing more but go about their own ways while not noticing that the blonde had already noticed them long ago and used his powers to eavesdrow. Night time, calming, sipping his sake on the balcony sat our blonde protagonist as he wore a black kimono with red lines adorning it. For him today was an amusing day as he getting drunk when all of them went to drink from the fountain. What's more amusing is how the remaining students try to wake them up and not get into trouble. Teachers next would be the swordswoman, who almost gave Negi an impromptu sex change in the hot springs, and him and the rodent accusing her of being a spy. He only because he walked in on them, and boy was it a sight for him. And the amusing thing was when they try to deny or talk their way out of it, he chuckled once again about their explanation while taking yet another sip of his sake. Giving out a relaxing sigh, he said out loud to himself, it seems that the Woma little full of herself if something like that could escape my sights. And just like that he disappear into the wind as though he was never there. Elsewhere, a battle rages on nearby as Negi, Asuna and Setsuna tries to save Kanoka, who was being held captive, with the 3 on the losing side, with Setsuna being occupy another girl while Asuna was close to being molested by monkeys, and Negi trying and failing to negotiate with Kanoka's captor. Her captor seemed to feel arrogant as she gloated to them, ha ha ha, all of you will fail as we, the Kansai Mage Association, will destroy those pesky Western mages. Ojo-sama here will be the one to do it, and not even the Sorcerer Supreme can do anything about it. Ahahaha. It was then though a voice echoed throughout the area in a mocking tone, oh really, young one? The captor's eyes widened as all of a sudden, a giant gust of wind blew violently past the people there, and in the blink of an eye the monkeys, swordswoman, and they all sent flying back to the ground. Looking back up, the captor could see her monkeys disappear into the wind before turning back to see her target in the hands of the one person she did not want. He though was having an amused look on his face as he had Kanoka in a bridal carry while looking on at the captor before saying to her, did you really think that some caliber could sneak past me? Please, you are nothing but a child to me. He then looks to the side of the alley for a bit before continuing on, your partner on the other hand though might just make good for a warm-up. Don't you think?" Stepping out from the shadows was a child with gray mop-like hair with a face that barely showed any emotion, but if one could see closer, they would see the boy T got ready for what could be a fight for his life if the power he was feeling was any indication, and that night could be one of many that Negi, Asuna and Setsuna wow many years to come. 5 days later, Xavier's school for the gifted. In front of the gates of the mansion a portal opened up and there the Sorcerer Supreme walked out from it, but this time though he decided to bring Shizuka with H. The wife of the Sorcerer Supreme had her arms wrapped around his while the two casually walked towards the gates there. The blonde went ahead and rang the doorbell and waited for a while. A female voice then came out from the speakers. "Hello. Welcome to the Xavier's school for the gifted, may I help you?" Naruto smiled for a bit as he answered her. "It's me, Professor Xavier called saying that something interesting happened. Mind if I come in?" The voice must have realized who it was as her tone changed just slightly. "Oh Mr. Strange, sorry about that. I thought that it would be a while before you reach here." The gates right now, the gates to the school/mansion slowly opened up for the two, showing its luscious lawn and building that the two took in before they headed towards the doors. T opened up to show Aurora standing there with a serene smile on her face. She wore a white long-sleeve shirt and jeans that hug her in every way possible, though that was not what the sorcerer and his wife were looking at as a little tuft of blonde hair tackled him into a hug. It was only through years of training in Psalm that Naruto didn't fall down as he looks down with a smile on his face at an equally smiling Alexia who was beaming in happiness. This time she wore a light blue coat and skirt. It was then though she noticed Shizuka, who still had her arms wrapped around Naruto's arm. Seeing this, she quickly went into meek mode as she made a squeak in the blonde's leg with her head peeking out of it as she shyly waved at the fox lady. Shizuka couldn't help but squeal as she saw how cute the girl was acting, but before she could smother her, Naruto quickly intervened as soon as he saw the look in H. Shizuka pouted a little that she couldn't smother the cute girl, which made Naruto and Aurora giggle a little before all of them headed into Professor Xavier's office. A while later, everyone sat down onto the chairs provided, with Naruto sitting on one with Shizuka sitting on his lap. Aurora was standing next to Professor Xavier, who with a smile, while Alexia was sat in the other seat, but she was occupied with playing with her blue bird and the two teddy bears. Seeing how she was brought some smiles on the faces of the people there as Naruto quipped first, "Looks like she's enjoying herself here." Xavier nodded as he answered the sorcerer, "Yes, she does. She still has some issues when meeting new people, but that's all right as we are helping her with that." Is hearing that he was mentioning about her. Alexia nodded enthusiastically, which made the people chuckle or giggle at her antics before Xavier continued on, "Well, again thank you for bringing her here. I don't know what would have happened if you didn't." The blonde sorcerer just waved him off saying, "No need for that, Professor. After all, it's in my nature to help those in need of it if I could." Hearing a scoff, Naruto turned towards Shizuka with a light glare at the Kyuubi, who grinned at him a little before giving him a kiss on the lips to placate him. It worked. She knew she was going to get it once they got back, but that didn't bother her either way. Naruto on the other hand just shake his head knowing his wife's antics. Be back to the professor saying, "So Professor, you said something about wanting my help with Alexia?" Nodding, the telepath answered the Sorcerer Supreme as he interlocked his fingers. "Yes, this is because despite various teachers we have here, none of them are able to use her special powers, and even more so when hers is so unique. Even more so when we discovered something 2 days ago," raising an eyebrow in curiosity. The professor turned towards Alexia as he spoke to her in a grandfatherly tone. "Alexia, don't you want to show Naruto here what you ago?" The blonde girl was now beaming in happiness when she heard that as she got from her seat and started to try and drag the older blonde, who raised his eyebrow in Aurora and Shizuka giggle at her antics, seeing that she wants to show it to him real bad. Naruto and Shizuka got up from their seat and decided to follow the girl with Aurora and Xavier in tow. A while late, inside of a room with 2 bunk beds and was decorated with an assortment of pictures and the like, showing that it was a shared room between Alexia and 3OT. Said girl headed towards her bed and suddenly took out a small box from there, making the Naruto and Shizuka a little more curious when she then opened it. Show cards before she took one card out and then a blue glow shine from the card, which made the Sorcerer Supreme raise his eyebrow as the light show ended when it did. What wasn't there before now suddenly was a blue round furred creature with a pair of wings appeared before them. Shizuka was the first to voice out loud, "Aw, aren't you just the cutest little thing?" She went and petted the creature which purred in its tongue, "Curry." While Shizuka was petting the creature, the blonde sorcerer turned back towards the two X-men with a raised eyebrow as he said to them, not wanting to sound like a didn't she already establish that she could create things by using her powers? Nodding, the professor decided to elaborate, "Yes. But none of us knew how to train her in the use of her powers, and the closets is Miss Monroe here, but it's different unique way." The Sorcerer Supreme seemed to hum in thought for a bit as he discreetly used his magic in his eyes to look at the creature and Alexia, and what he saw made him as he voice out, "Interesting." The two X-men were curious as to what he meant as the two looked back to see Alexia playing with both the creature and Shizuka. Despite not looking at them, the BL there unasked question, it would seem that Alexia is more than meets the eye. Turning back to them, he asked the two, "Did you try to see if she could summon any more of those?" This time though it was Aurora who answered him, "We did, but she said she could summon them, but depending on which card can take a lot out of her, and when she magic or trap cards also varied, but we've been unable to tell how or why does it drain her powers differently." Again, the blonde hummed in mild intrigue before an idea came to his mind before he asked them, "If it is like this then I don't mind teaching her. So when can we be?" Professor Xavier was the one who answered him, "If possible. You can get started today, though I hope you don't mind if some of our staff watch you." Naruto tapped his chin in thought for a bit before he nodded saying, "Sure, I don't mind. Gives me more time to show how awesome I am, right?" He ended that with a who giggle a little at how the blonde was acting before all three of them turned back to call back the two plus the creature who followed for a bit as all of them decided towards the training room. Along the way though, the group 5+1 creature almost bumped into yet another one of the staff. Their thoughts said staff member maneuvered his body in AW can be hoped by an Olympic gymnast. The new person was a blue-furred ape-like man wearing a professor's coat and glasses while having a book in his hand. The man seemed to notice them as he said, "Ah, Professor, Miss Monroe, what brings you down here?" Aurora was the one that answered the ape-like man, "Well, Hank, we are going to the danger room so that we can have Alexia here learn how to use her powers from teacher." "Oh, and who would that be?" asked Hank, and the moment he saw the blonde, his eyes widened as a smirk was on the sorcerer's face where the blonde answered his "Chew the matter, Hank, don't you recognize your old friend from college? Strange, is that you?" "Oh come on, don't you remember the good times we've had back then, especially when we pranked that dumbass jock Christian?" Now his eyes were widened close to comical as the two males hugged each other with Hank saying, "My stars, it is you. I haven't seen you since graduation, that it is my now blue foo red friend that it is. So, this is what you do now, huh? Saving people with you gymnastic skills," Naruto said with a hint of mirth on his face. Friends had arms over each other's shoulders before Professor Xavier decides to get their attention. "Now that you two have reacquainted with each other, shall we all we do have a few people curious about your abilities." The two looked at the professor for a moment before Naruto patted his old friend on the back as he said to him, "We'll catch up later, okay, and who knows, maybe some of our stories of our glory days." The blue-furred man chuckled at the blonde man's antics as he seemed to reminiscing the times he had with him as he said, "Ah, good times. Well, let's not keep the we." The two shared a good laugh before all of them headed to the danger room a few minutes in, and right now in the control room of the danger room were Shizuka, Professor Xavier, Aurora, Hank and two more with them as Logan and Kitty W looking down at a field of grass made by the danger room where Alexia looks on in awe while Naruto just smiled at how she was acting. He decided to get her attention by clapping his hand for a bit. Once that he got her attention, the blonde sorcerer decides to start his impromptu lesson. "Well then, my grasshopper, today is your first lesson in summoning." He could see her thinking a mile a minute with silence as he continued on. "Now, the reason for it is because you, my cute little sunshine, have a very unique power. You manipulate your energy, but now it seems that you have the ability to summon sentient things like winged Kuribo over here." Said creature tilts its head/body in curiosity while the blonde walked towards it and started to pet it, making it purr for a bit as he said to Alexia, "Now, what's differ guy here and your bird is that the bird you made was created from your imagination, so it's hardwired to listen to your command mostly. That's why it followed you instead of acting like a normal bird. but to make it more simple it's like a pet. He then took out a card in his hand before showing to her the picture of a card from the similar card game she had, but this one was a white dragon. He could see T wondering where this was going, so he decided to indulge her. This, in a way, is similar yet different at the same time, because this kind of summoning allows you to partner or familiar in some cases, so in a way they will listen to you but they will also have their own thoughts, so they're like a person being called out, to prove his point. The Sorcerer Supreme threw the card into the field and there a portal opened up and then the dragon from the card burst forth and appeared fro its full form. The dragon was both majestic and powerful as it landed right behind him with its arm crossed and wings wide, showing its form that made the girl and look on in awe as Naruto said to her, "Now the reason for this is one of the basic rule of magic." He slowly counted out his fingers to the awed girl saying, "Power, focus, and effect. These are the things that you should know about." He then nodded to the dragon which it returned in kind before it took off in a gust of speed into the air with its wings, showing itself off as the girl kept on staring at it. Made Naruto chuckle as he snapped his fingers to get her attention. The girl looks back to him when he did that, which he then said, "In this case the power is you. The focus is those cards and effect is what happens after that." The dragon then hovered behind Alexia, who looks up to see it charging up something in its mouth before it suddenly fired right at the open field behind the sorcerer, where it exploded in a blaze of destruction that cratered the ground behind him, causing a shockwave that blew a vicious wind that forced Alexia to cover her eyes. Sorcerer barely seemed phased at it as he continued on. "Now in summoning, there are a lot of things that you should know. First, you can't summon any of your part have enough energy or you'll just end up wasting your energy." The dragon then went to hover behind him before it lowered its head so the blonde could pet it as he continued. "Second, is that summon partners of familiars nay stay in this realm, so in this case the cards are the anchor, so make sure that it doesn't get destroyed, but once you mastered this then you don't need them like so." The white dragon then disappeared back into the card in a bright flash of light, making Alexia blink a little in curiosity when all of a sudden the ground behind him exp flames of glory that surprised her a little as she fell on her, but when she saw a different dragon lading right behind the blonde sorcerer. This dragon was different from the first one, as where the first looked majestic, this one was demonic looking with 3 horns on its head, slick back with a small cu end with a black and red color scheme. To her this dragon looked both menacing yet powerful at the same time, as the dragon then lowered its head right in front, intimidated her a bit until Naruto snapped his fingers, making it reared his head back for a bit while the blonde continued his lecture. "Now, another thing you should summoning is that each summon is different in their own ways, like Red Archfiend over here," patting the dragon on the leg. The blonde then nodded to it before it disappeared in a burst of flames, leaving the two there plus one winged Kuribo looking on in awe. Finished it up. "Lastly is that when you summon something, you better make sure is that what you summoned is something you can control. Believe me, there are summoning in the world, so you better be careful about any of those that you summoned." Seeing her nod in confirmation, the blonde then clapped his hands once as he said happily, "Now then, let's get to the finer details of summoning now, shall we? Danger room, control room." "So like that was totally cool on how he summoned that dragon, right?" chirped a very happy Catherine Pride as she saw the two down there summon out stuff before S and asked him, "So Hank, how did you know him anyway?" The blue-furred man chuckled at his colleague's enthusiastic way of saying things as he hummed and thought for a bit before he answered them. "Well, I met Strange back we were bunked together in the dorms. He was a little weird at times, but those were the best times I probably had." As soon as he said that, a small giggle was heard which made everyone there turn to see Shizuka with a hand to her mouth as though she saw something amusing. Look, she went to indulge them. "Come on now Hank, do tell them some of the good times you had with my husband. Like the time the two of you pranked the vice PR hanging him by his underwear in a wedgie while he was being attacked by a swarm of bees that brought on some raised eyebrows as all of them turned towards a sheepish Hank who was scratching his cheek a little as Ororo said, 'Did you really do what she do, vice principal?' The way he looked was all that she needed to know, as Logan then chuckled a little as he said to him, 'Well, what do you know, never thought that you had that in you. Next, you and Blondie over there got invited to the girls' sorority dorm where the two of you popped your cherry. Another fit of giggles made everyone their turn to see Shizuka now sporting a megawatt grin on her face as she said to him, "Hee hee, oh believe me, they really show good time, and even more so that they still called them after graduation." Now that brought about a full-blown reaction as all of them snapped towards Hank, who was now chuckling a little, but one could see a tint of pink of his cheeks. On H says it all to them, where Logan nearly dropped his jaw in shock before he said to him, *whistle*, never thought that you had that in you, McCoy. So I guess that you big wig nerd after all. Had made the Wolverine laugh a little, and soon after that everyone started to follow after him, as today everyone there learned something new about their resident B genius, Avengers Mansion. To say the least that Steve Rogers was confused was an understatement. He went out to do some sightseeing for about 15 minutes until he stopped at a nearby. The moment he walked out of there, he saw a homeless girl running past him, and then 2 very big dogs followed after her. Seeing that she was in trouble, the first Avenger sprung into action and defended her from them, but for some reason the dogs were somehow more viscous and determined to attack the girl he was defending. But he was shocked when one of the dogs was suddenly struck by a blast of blue energy. Turning, he saw that it came from the girl, who was a little fatigued after that, but he was then back into it as he killed the other dog, and once again he was confused. It disappeared into wisp of smoke. He then goes back to the girl, who was a little scared, so he decided to help her out, but he knew that she won't be well liked. After a brief conversation he had with 2 mutants in the world today, he wanted to take her to the school he heard about, but he didn't know where it was, so now he was here to ask Tony for directions on Naruto and Amora, who was about to leave, and now he was still confused as he said to him, "What do you mean by that, Strange?" All he got was a small amused smile from the sorcerer's face as he answered him, "Well, Mr. Rogers, by the looks of things I say that you have stumbled into yet another development." Seeing the still confused look, the blonde continued on as he let the bird fly back into the girl's hands, "Because the girl you're holding right there is a demigod." Now his eyes widen as he looks back at the somewhat confused girl, who he could see that she was now thinking about what the sorcerer just revealed. Looking back, he then motioned him to the living room, where Amora begrudgingly followed as she knew that she wasn't going to leave this place. It seemed that sometime through Tony decided to leave, probably to his lab, as the for all sat in the living room conjuring up some snacks and tea, which made the awe where Steve was still confused at what he meant. As he asked, "You mean this girl right here is a demigod?" Looking at the girl who devoured the snacks like a hungry wolf, the blonde sorcerer nodded as he answered the first Avenger, "Yes, after all, if Thor a god from Norse reals, so why not other pantheon?" The first Avenger seemed to think for a bit before he nodded at the answer before saying out, "So if she is a demigod, then who are her parents, and is the reason that is because of her heritage?" The moment he said parents, the girl's mood dropped a little, making the soldier widen for a bit as Naruto answered him, "Sad to say, Cap, but demigods from her lousy parents." To cheer the girl up, the blonde sorcerer decided to create 2 teddy bears from this air. One male and female based their clothing and made them dance right in FR. Seeing the bears dance managed to lighten the girl's mood for a bit as she tries to reach out to them but miss as the bears went to cuddle her, making her giggle. For continued with his explanation, "She's from the Greek pantheon, and believe me, when it comes down to it, they are the most childish and immature of the pantheon that I've had the displeasure to, minus a few here and there, but overall they are a chore to deal with." Steve looks at the sorcerer a little weirdly as he said, "Okay." Noticing the look, Naruto just waved him off as he said, "Anyways, what I find interesting is that she has inherited something unique from her father." Again, that brought another bout of confusion to the first Avenger as Naruto answered his unasked question, "By that I mean that her father genes had somehow able to manipulate energy for some reason, so basically she's a mutant demigod." Now that brought some raised eyebrows as Steve looks on at the girl playing with the bears and that blue bird of hers before he asked the blonde sorcerer, "What do that, I mean you did say she is a demigod, so won't some of her father DNA be with her? Why would you say that she is interesting?" Not missing a beat, the Sorcerer Supreme answered him, "Because if she is the daughter of who I think she is, then believe me, her life is about chaotic." Then it Alria that put a frown to Steve's face as he knew what he meant, because he got a brief review about how mutants were treated which disgusted him, but now that he was a demigod, he needed to know some information before he tries to figure out a solution as he asked, "Why do you say that?" The blonde sorcerer didn't hesitate to answer him, "Because when she grows older, she will attract a lot of monster wanting to tear her limb from limb, and Conside mother was then you could say that two in particular have an axe to grind with her, but because they can't they go for the next best thing. Steve had to ball his hands a little at what he was hearing as he voiced out, the hell. They're just kids. If they got a beef with their parents then why should they sue? For knowing what he meant, the blonde closed his eyes in resignation as he said to him, that's because when it comes down to it, Cap, practically every monster in the EV were made by the so-called gods themselves. From Asterion the Minotaur to Medea of Colchis to Arachne the mother of all spiders and probably one of the more femme Medusa of the Gorgon sisters. There was a tense silence for a bit as the sorcerer decided to continue on. The fact is that even with these monsters, the only for the kids to survive is in a summer, don't believe it, creating a portal. Steve could make out the picture of a camp with cabins in a semicircle formation with a fireplace in the center of it all, but what shocked the man had what looked like obstacle courses that seemed to made out of a crazy man's novel as he saw lave coming out of a wall climb. A spinning tower with ladders and climbing, and all around he could see kids from 7 to 8 to around 14 to 15 years old training in using weapons like bows and arrows and swords. He was a little stunned at just what this was as words seemed to fail him, but Naruto knew what he wanted to ask, so he obliged to him. Yes, this is their camp. In H look good, but for the most part it's at best a haven for kids like her to go to. Usually they're found by satyrs who takes a grueling task to bring them here no matter which by itself is funny considering that every satyr I have met are coward that are scared of their own shadows aside from one. After that they are located in H. He is a god of travelers until they are claimed by their parents holding out a hand to stop him. The first Avenger parroted out, claimed? Nodding, the blonde continued on, yes, claim. You see, when it comes to the Greeks their egos are so massive that they could block out the entire universe if they want, only claim their children if they feel like it or that they did something spectacular to earn their attention. He could see the anger flashing on the soldier's face, and who could blame him as the sorcerer continued on. Yeah, that's how they all are, and believe me, aside from no, the rest are just like that. Not only that, but some of them usually go for quest, which most of the time are nothing more than doing chores because the gods see from their heads or toes, though a quest hasn't been issued after an incident about 7 years back, but it was restarted sometime last year when that weird thund happened. Seeing him nod, he continued on, yeah. See, around that time the self-proclaimed king of Olympus had his nightlight stolen by one of his grandsons, but he blamed nephew just because he happened to just be in the city, and because of it he was willing to go to war just because of it. Not only that, but it seemed that his older br his weapons stolen, and he blamed it also on the kid, and after a whirlwind of stupidity they were returned, and it turns out that his son was mind controlled to keep it hid. I was there just so that they wouldn't come to blows, and as much as I wanted to I can't exactly interfere in the quest unless I'm invited by the quest leader or the me. As much as I wanted to get things over with, I can't overstep some boundaries. Steve seemed to get the point as he sighed for a bit before saying, I see. So does that mean that you can't help her in any way? Because from what you told me, I wrath her life free and not go to this so-called camp that you describe. He could see the sorcerer hummed in thought for a bit as he wondered if he could without overstepping his boundaries for a few moments until a light bulb moment. Well, I might have something. Looking at the first Avenger, he decided to voice out his plan. Well, I'm sure you know of a school that helps people like her with special abilities, right? Seeing the so continued on, we are going to take her there so she could learn how to use her powers. After all, she is the first mutant demigod, and she could actually learn not on powers, but she could live somewhat more freely than what she would now. And from what I heard is that they had their own protectors there ready to defend people. Steve Rogers listened intently at what he just said for a few moments as he looks between the girl playing with her new toys and to the blonde sorcerer, and then he know to agree to his proposition. Amora huff angrily as she realizes that she wasn't going to be rid of this soon, but sadly to her she couldn't protest it considering her situation to not be left alone, as in Naruto's home was out visiting one of their mother-in-law's home for some reason. A few minutes later, right now on the Avengers jet were Captain America, Naruto, Amora, and the child who introduced herself as Alexia Rhodes, who was a little apprehensive about talky father, which neither of the people there were willing to ask her. So now here they were on the jet heading towards the Xavier's school for the gifted that the adults they called early on to announce their arrival to the school. On the other end of the phone was the voice of an aged man who apparently was Professor Xavier. He se about having a new student who would be a good addition to his School as Professor Xavier was no stranger to helping people with nowhere to go because of their it didn't take long as they were already reached Westchester where the school was located and from there the backyard of a mansion which was also the school op show a landing pad underground. Captain America landed the jet in the pad and after that he opened up the pad where everyone in it walked out of there. Outside the jet were a group of people awaiting their arrival. The group were the X-Men consisting of Professor Xavier, Scott Summers, Jean Grey, Logan, Aurora Mo, Kitty Pryde and Kurt Wagner. The professor was the first greeted them with a hand out. Hello and welcome to the Xavier School for the Gifted. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. Returning the gesture, Captain America introduces himself. Likewise, I presume that you know why we're here. Nodding, he then looks towards Alexia, who got a new blue sundress that Naruto had made appear, making her look a little more presentable as she shyly hid behind. Nudge her a little, making her to understand what he wanted her to do as she waved a little while introducing herself. Hello. My name's Alexia, nice to meet you. Giving her a friendly smile, Professor Xavier said to her, hello there, do not be afraid, you are among friends here and we can help you with your gifts. Alexia was still a little apprehensive about it when she looked at them, but for some reason she calmed down a little as though she knew they wouldn't hurt them. She out from Naruto and walked towards Aurora, who held her hand and said to her, well then why don't we have a look around and let them have a talk, shall we? Nodding, Alexia held her hand and was about to walk with her before turning back to Steve and Naruto. Seeing the look, Naruto created the two bears again and M followed her for a bit and waved her off with a smile where she returned in kind before she, Aurora, Kitty and Kurt headed off to somewhere. Now that they were gone, the rest of the people there headed towards the office they started to discuss about Alexia. Few minutes later, I see, this is quite troubling if I do say so myself, said a slightly concerned Xavier as he interlocked his fingers while looking on at the three before him. After hearing oh this girl was made the aged professor a little weary as he remembered some of the mythology regarding them. The rest of the X-Men were also a little on guard to say the least, but Naruto decided to assure them, don't worry about it, but I am going to have you know a few regarding to her or anyone else. Seeing him nod, the blonde continued on, first off, she will, and believe me, she will attract some monsters. You might see them as something else but I'm not sure if, but anyways when she says there's a monster then you will ask her what it looks like and where. Killing them is easy if you aim for vitals for killing blows. Next on, she can't understand words as all of them were hardwired to Greek with their dyslexia, and get ready for her hyperactiveness considering she has ADHD, which is the supposedly. Hearing a scoff from Logan, Xavier thought about it for a while about what he said for a few moments before he answered him, she will be welcome here as I have rejecting her no matter what. That brought some relief for the two males while the female just huffed slightly for no reason as Steve said to him, thank you, Professor. You have no idea how much O was giving him a warm smile. The professor said to him, don't worry Mr. Rogers. We won't shy away from anyone who would need our help no matter what, but I have to are going to do. After this the two males seemed to thought about it before Steve said, first, we'll come visit her from time to time so she'll have some familiarity for now, but I'm worried ABO to happen to her next. This time though was Naruto who answered him, don't worry about it. I've given her a charm to ward off most of any monster that might come near, but because at most it's a short-term thing since any monster close enough might not be enough for the charm to work, and if I make it stronger than other creatures might Han wondering who it is trying to ward them off, and most of them might be able to counteract it. Xavier nodded knowing what he meant as he said to them, I see, so how about we have a tour of our school, shall we? I'm sure that Alexia might feel a little anxious too there. The two nodded for a bit as all of them were led towards the cafeteria by Jean Grey while the rest stayed back in the office to discuss some stuff. When they he'd greeted by the sight of a giggling Alexia and Kitty as the two played with the bears while Aurora was smiling at them as she had a cup of tea in hand. Kurt was no as the four walked towards them. Alexia saw them coming and with a bright smile, she waved them over where the three of the four returned in kind. Amora was still a little pissy, but a look from Na enough for her to made sure she didn't say anything. All of them stayed behind for a while to get to know the people there for a while until it was time for everyone to head back with Naruto and Amora using a portal the jet, Naruto's home. Once again a portal opened up in the home of the Sorcerer Supreme as the two walked out of there, and just in time too as Clea, Shizuka and Wong were back from Amora headed up to her room without a word but Naruto went and kissed the cheek of his wives as they talked about their day. Clea was about to say something about her day, but all of a sudden their security spells rang out through the house. Looking toward her husband with a raised eye, decided to went ahead to answer it. As he opened the door to his home, from there stood a woman with flowing blonde hair that reached past her shoulders and steel-gray eyes stare intently at the sorcerer with a frown on her face. Naruto on the other hand didn't seem too worried about it as he said to her, well, figured that you might come here soon, so what can I do for you? The dark skies loom over Asgard as lightning flashed all around the once glorious city of the Norse gods, and it is then the fate of the world is all on this fight as Lock God looks on at the man before him. The winds howled with fury as the coat of the Sorcerer Supreme flowed with it as the blonde stares at his opponent with a his eye. The two stare each other down in what could be hours but was more than mere seconds, and a flash of lightning started their bout. Loki struck first as he fired a blast of his magic, but Naruto puts up a barrier to block it before retaliating with a hail of magic arrows, but they were destroyed with Loki's trident. Before it could even reach him, the trickster god charged right in with his weapon poised to stab the blonde sorcerer. Seeing this, Naruto summoned out twin swords in his hands and parried the retaliating with a push that sent the trickster god flying backwards. That didn't deter Loki as he fired a continuous blast of his magic, but all of them were deflected by the swords Naruto wielded. The blonde sorcerer then dismissed his weapons before he made a big circle with his arms, and from there four white serpents came forth from the portal right into Loki sent out a wave from his trident and the magic wave destroyed all four of them. He would have retaliated if it wasn't for the fact that he saw no signs of him anywhere. It was only through his years of experience fighting did he manage to quickle up a shield. Did he blocked a spear that would have stabbed him if he didn't do so, and he looks to the source to see Naruto near a tower. The trickster god quickly flew upwards to dodge a few more blasts of magic before he summoned lightning from the skies to strike down Naruto, who diverted it to A with his magic before he summoned his own lightning towards him. Loki just barely dodged the lightning that could have struck him if he didn't before he suddenly felt a pain on his back, and then he plummeted to the ground with the race car and the force of an explosion. The dust kicked up quite a bit before Loki dispersed it with a wave of his trident and looks up, only to have his eyes widen as made of magic headed straight for him, pushing his limits to the max. Loki manages to dispel the giant orb before it could touch him. With his eyes filled with rage at the blonde for outdoing him in about arts, he slammed the trident right into the ground where it cracked all over before exploding outwards, and giant vines burst up charging right into Naruto. Seeing the vines, the Sorcerer Supreme took a deep breath and then from his mouth he blew a torrent of fire right at the attacking vines, burning them to a crisp. He stopped the fire as it headed straight for Loki. Loki countered it by firing his magic right into the center of the torrent, dispersing the torrent of flames like nothing, but his blast still went on heading towards the maid. The blast avoided him before he turns it, hurls it right back to the trickster god, but with a little added boost as the blast turned bright red and struck straight. Fabulous explosion that destroyed the area he was in. The explosion manages to kick up a lot of smoke, making the area unable to see by most people there, but the blonde sorcerer didn't let his guard down as he stared area. His senses blared as he puts up a force field to block a lightning bolt aimed right at him, but the force was enough to push him back onto a bridge. It wasn't long till Naruto diverted the lightning back to the skies without any wounds at all as he looks on at the now ascending Loki, who said to him, "I'll admit Source have underestimated you, but no more you and those Avengers and all of the 9 realms will fall before me." The trickster god then exploded with energy as the skies darken even more and the winds howl. The ground quakes and everything in between is going to be swept. Process. Seeing the spike in power, the blonde sorcerer widened his eyes slightly as he shouted to him, "Are you mad? Stop this now, you idiot, before you bring down all the realms. You'll bring about Ragnarok, dumbass." Despite hearing that, Loki didn't seem to care as he answered him with an insane gleam in his eyes, "Then so be it." He then poured out as much as he could and even more as the entire place shook as much as it can hold, with buildings crumble and the ground cracks out. Toward seeing that the power was close to destructive results, the Sorcerer Supreme narrowed his eyes for a bit before he decided to level the playing field. Suddenly, power which not only matched Loki's but the transcended that as he summoned out chains made of light and wrapped it around the limbs of the trickster god. The moment he felt the chains wrapped around him, the trickster god tried to break free from it, but it was proven futile as the chains held firm. Preventing him he flew a string of curses, but still increasing his powers to destructive proportions. The blonde then used his magic to counter his, and then it was slowly repressed by it as the Sorcerer Supreme pushed all of it down back to the struggling Loki, who ounce of his powers to break free, but to no avail as he felt his powers being suppressed by him, and before he knew it the blonde has successfully prevented him from the 9 realms. What shocked him even more was when the blonde was taking away his powers, he screamed to him as he felt the Odin force leaving his body and right into the BLO, collected all of it before he saw then blonde firing it all right into the throne room. The trickster god widened his eyes as he saw what he thought was rightfully his heading back towards the throne room where one Odin lay to rest in his Odin sleep. Lasted just mere seconds, but to him it felt like an eternity as all of a sudden, he saw an explosion of power as a figure appeared before him. From there he glared at the person who he thought was the reason for him being this way as he locked onto the eyes of Odin, the king and ruler of Asgard, who look on shame and anger as he said to him, "Loki, for long I have ignored your ways, but this has gone too far. It seems that the realm of silence was far too kind for you." Loki, despite his state, glared at him as he retorts, "You will never be rid of me, you old fool, so go ahead, I will never stop until I take what is rightfully mine." It seemed that Odin didn't like it as his eyes glowed with rage as he said in a cold tone, "If you think that the realm of silence was all I could do, then you do not know of fear." Before he teleported him to somewhere, leaving just the blonde sorcerer to look on at the scene. Moments ago, for a while before he shrugged and headed BA room. Few minutes later, in the somewhat disheveled look of the throne room was where the Avengers stood proudly before the Asgardians with Odin sitting on his throne. It was a while aft, and now everyone now could somewhat relax as Odin said to them, "You have our gratitude, Avengers, for saving all of the 9 realms. It seems that my son Thor did error in his judgment to stay in Midgard, so for that you have our thanks, and should you need our help then it shall be yours." Avengers all of them nodded towards the ruler of Asgard until Hawkeye decided to point out, "Now that is good and all, but what do we do with her?" Everyone there now turned to see a chained Amora as she tries valiantly to free herself from her bindings that Odin placed her in. Lady Sif was the first to voice out, "We send to the dungeons of never-ending darkness and leave her there for all eternity." Some of the Asgardians cheered for it, but that really didn't sit well for the Avengers as Captain America said, "That's a little harsh, don't you think? I mean, she was P-control, and from what I heard about Loki he was a manipulator." Lady Sif then again answered him, "Maybe, but she still has to be punished for her crimes for aligning herself with the likes from him." "Enough," Odin bellowed out, making all of them turn to him as he did not want this to escalate further. Seeing they all had their eyes on him, he decided to give his Amora the Enchantress. "For long you have conspired with the likes of Loki to bring down Asgard, and not only that, but you have sown the seeds of chaos and destroy the 9 realms, and for that this is my decree. You will now be sentenced into servitude with a mortal of my choosing, and you will follow to his or her every desire." He then created a collar around her neck along with shackles on her arms as the god continued on, "These will be proof of your servitude, as only I or your master ones to release you from it, and should you try to kill your master, then those that bind you will cast you to the deepest pits in the 9 realms where you will never." Amora could only widen her eyes at his decree as she tries to break out of her bonds, but to no avail before she scream a slew of curses for a bit before the chains gag over her mouth, silencing her for a moment as Hawkeye had to quip out, "Sweet, now we get to have a maid for the mansion, ain't that right, Stark?" Iron Man seemed to hum in thought for a bit while Captain America had a slight frown. But before the first Avenger could say anything, Odin decided to said to them, "But Amora will not serve you but the sorcerer." It was then Naruto almost tripped himself with his legs as soon as he heard that before he shouted out, "Say what?" Not missing a beat, Odin quickly answered the blonde sorcerer, "Yes. Because out of the mortals here you are the only one who could handle her powers, and not only more well versed in the mystic arts, so you are able to understand should she tries to use it." The sorcerer could look on in shock for a bit and seemed to be unmoving for a while until he facepalmed and mumbled out loud, "They are not going to love this. I can back is going to be one hell of a talk." The rest of the people there just look on curiously as the Sorcerer Supreme kept on mumbling about stuff like, "Why me?" or "Going to die," and a few more lines like. Blonde slumped his shoulders as nodding his head, Agreeing to be Amora's warden, so to speak, as an invisible line of chain connected him to Amora, where the Encha help but glare at the Sorcerer Supreme. The blonde sorcerer on the other hand couldn't help but sigh and resign to his fate into becoming a warden to her Earth. A while later, a portal opened up once again right in front of the house of the Sorcerer Supreme, with the blonde coming out of there along with his new entourage, so to speak, daggers at him. Sighing once again, the two walked towards the door, with Naruto dreading every step they take until they reached the doors before he could even touch the knob. The doors swung open with a force that made the blonde glad he knew to reinforce it, because standing right there was Clea crossed under her chest while she had a frown on her face. He knew what that look meant as he looks off to the side to see a giggling redhead with fox ears and AF behind her, which was swaying slightly as though amused at the situation. He knew that he wasn't going to get out of this, so sighing once more, he ushered the enchantress into his home as he wondered if he could hide out in his mother should it go sour. One explanation later, Clea now started to massage her head after she heard as to why Amora was here, and safe to say, she was definitely annoyed that someone of her reputation being wasn't a stranger to have people in their homes, where some of them were prisoners that escaped from somewhere and her husband had to hunt them down and cap to live out the rest of whatever sentence they might or going to have. She heard an amused giggle from next to her, which made her turn to see an amused look on the fox woman's face, where she couldn't help but said to her, "I suppose this amusing, don't you, Shizuka?" Seeing her nod, the white-haired sorceress sighs once again as she looks to her now sheepish husband and an annoyed Amora who wants to be anywhere but here. To them, it cannot be helped since it was from Odin, but there will be rules that you will obey since you are under our charge. If you even think about breaking any of matter the circumstances, then I assure you, Odin himself will pity you for the punishment I will descend upon you. Amora felt a cold chill down her back as she felt the rising powers of Clea, and she couldn't help but wonder just how she even got in this mess anyways, until she used her powers, and safe to say, she grimaced as she just remembered why and how she got into this mess after ironing out a few details. Everyone retire for the day as Amora was showed to her room by Wong, while the sorcerer and his wives headed off to the bedroom. Next day, Avengers Mansion. Right now in the living room of the Avengers Mansion was the blonde sorcerer as he created yet another magic circle in the air before it set into the wall and disappeared. He turns back to see Iron Man right behind him with his tech glasses and a pad in hand, scanning and analyzing what he just did. He didn't mind as he knew that he would have used his AI to do it either way, so he just let him do what he liked. He looks to the side to see Amora, who was loungy as she was reading a book as she tries to pass the time with something despite her being under his charge for about half a day at most. She was proving to be quite a hassle with her trying and failing to break free from her bonds, and at half of the morning of her trying to get her to eat breakfast, and after a few minutes of her shouting curses and the like till her stomach failed her and rumbled with bear. After that ordeal was trying to separate her and some of the Avengers from getting into each other's throats while he did his work on warding spells in the mansion. A chore especially with Hawkeye as he tried to make jabs every single waking moment of his job, and invoking his inner prankster he sent the guy onto an inhabited somewhere in the Pacific, which made some of the rest laugh out loud, especially since the blonde sent him there with nothing more than his underwear. Tony was practically laughing his ass off the moment that he located Hawkeye, and everyone else joined in. Steve Rogers couldn't help but shake his head at his call, but he made no attempt to ask the blonde to bring him back, which made him figured that the archer needed to learn something about pissing off the wrong guy. Be late before the first Avenger decided to do some sightseeing. Seeing that he was finally done, Amora got off the couch and stood near the hallways waiting for him so she could leave this place before she might do something. Pad typing away something as he seemed to talk to someone about stuff that the blonde doesn't really know about, so he just started walking past her, who then followed behind. Some of the other Avengers were out doing their own thing as the mansion this time only had Iron Man, the Hulk and Black Panther, not counting the two. Naruto d some small talk with the Enchantress. "So Amora, how's life treating you?" Amora retorts to him, "If you must know, sorcerer, my life has been splendid. After all, I am powerless now, and my life is tied to you of all people, and I am now forced, and worse off is that I of all people have to live like a mortal." The Sorcerer Supreme had to shake his head at her antics, but he knew that he couldn't do much about it as she was under his charge. But that didn't stop him from her in some way to make her life slightly more tolerable. But he knew that his wife will snap if she keeps it up like this, with the question being when she "We'll do it." They were about to reach the entrance way until the doors opened from the outside and there was Steve Rogers in his biker jacket/jeans combo, but this time he manages to have a guest in his arms. The person was a girl no more than 8 with a disheveled shoulder-length blonde hair with steel gray eyes. She wore worn-out clothing that was slightly torn in a few places, but what was interesting was that she had a small blue bird made out of something on her shoulders before flew towards the outstretched finger of Naruto. Looking at it for a moment, Naruto low okays on between the girl and the bird for a while before he said, "Interesting." The next day, Naruto was now sitting right in the Avenger jet as it headed toward the mansion, which in his mind was actually funny as everything they must had their branded. As he saw the jet slowly started to land, so he decided to look at his pilot. Ms. Marvel was a blonde beauty with hair that reached past her shoulders. She wore a tight with a lightning bolt on her chest to her right waist with a red sash tied to her waist, thigh-high boots and elbow-long gloves. The moment that the jet landed, the two stepped out of the jet and headed towards the main room as they heard the last part of a conversation which said, "NW supposed to be?" The doors opened up for them to see the Avengers minus Ant-Man and Wasp all standing in a circle with a hologram of the world with yellow lines with a few overlap other in certain hot spots. The blonde sorcerer couldn't help but quip out, "Their ley lines." It was at that moment that everyone notices the two newly entered individual. Iron Man said, "What?" This time it was Thor that spoke out for him. "The sorcerer is correct, these are ley lines. Ley lines are places where the world connect to each other through the knee." Naruto himself also couldn't help but quip out, "And that's just for those of Norse mythology." Everyone there looked at him once again as the Sorcerer Supreme explained to them, "What you're seeing here is just the ley lines that connect with the 9 realms. Oh, there's a lot more than what you see here, but that's not what you wanted to know, right?" Thor answered him first. Iron Man has been searching for places like these so that I could return to Asgard, and Captain America had said that it had been done. His bout with the Red Skull, the blonde sorcerer seemed to hum in thought for a few moments as he said to them, "I assume that you need the ley lines for whatever you're doing." And nodding, Iron Man was about to explain his plans until an alarm rang throughout the room as a voice said out loud, "Warning. Dimension fluctuation spiking in these." A hologram then showed the point of origins of the fluctuation as Captain America barked out his orders, "All right people. Something's going on here, and by the look of good, so everyone will head off to a designated spot. Ms. Marvel, you'll go with Black Panther and Strange. Sorry about this, but it looks like your first day here." Might the blonde sorcerer just put up a hand and said, "I don't mind, it has been quiet lately with me, so I figure that this might be good for my audition, don't you think?" Seeing him like this, Captain America nodded as he said to him, "Then you are coming with me to one of these ley lines. Is that understood?" A nod was all he needed to see as everyone there headed off to their destination, with Captain America and Naruto walking through the desolate area they were in. Naruto decided to make some small talk. "So Cap, how does it feel being in the 21st century?" The first Avenger turned to him for a bit as he answered him, "Truthfully, I'm still trying to figure out half the stuff here, and when I thought I figure something new-fangled technology decides to throw me for another loop." He heard a light-hearted chuckle escape from the Sorcerer Supreme's mouth before he waved it off. "Sorry about that, it is kind of funny though seeing someone of adapting to our time." He knew that he was just merely making small talk, so he didn't mind as he shrugged his shoulders saying, "Maybe, but I think I'm handling it just fine. So how about you?" "Hawkeye told me you used to be a well-renowned surgeon. How did you end up being the Sorcerer Supreme anyways?" Naruto gave his own shrug as he answered him, "Well, you could say that it was due to funny circumstances that made me this way, and how about we leave it at that?" Rogers knew he hit a sore point for the guy as he noticed him rubbing his hands slightly, which made him end the conversation there until his senses went haywire or raise his shield against the oncoming missiles. But they didn't reach him as a blue force field tanked the shots. Looking behind him, he saw Naruto holding up his hand signifying that he was the one that erected the force field. As he turned back to see Crimson Dynamo landing in no words was said as Crimson Dynamo fired his weapons at them, forcing them to dodge as Naruto took to the skies and Captain America dodging to the side. Naruto took the fight first as he rained down lightning at the man who jumped to the side to dodge it, but all he got was a shield to his dome before the ground beania, and from there The earth burst forth in the shape of a dragon and it swallowed him whole. The captain slowly stood up as he saw the place where Crimson Dynamo was swallowed. He turned back towards the now descending sorcerer as he said to him, "Did why?" Seeing him shake his head. The blonde just waved him hand and from there Crimson Dynamo reappeared before them, but he was now being restrained in stone and him unable to do anything. As for extra measure, blue chains burst forth and wrapped itself around the concrete casing. Turning around, the two notice a stone floating in mid-air, which brought some confusion for the soldier as he turned to Naruto for answers. Not even looking at him, Supreme answered him without missing a beat, saying, "The Norn stones, real powerful stuff. Guess someone managed to take this from Carnilla, considering that I know off that holds them." It was then though the stones glowed brightly, making the two shields their eyes for a bit until it died down slightly until it was bearable for them to look. When all the three saw were what looked like spirits surrounding them before all of them charged right at them. Thinking quickly, the blonde sorcerer erected a barrier to protect them from the horde, and just as he was about to relax, the Sorcerer Supreme saw Captain America's shield. He couldn't shout it out in time as the stone broke, and from there all they saw was white. After a while, the three of them managed to look around them, and from there they could tell that something was wrong. Even more so for our blonde, as he narrowed slightly as he said out loud, "Oh crap." Seeing where they were, Captain America decided to ask him, "Strange, you know where we are?" Seeing the look on the sorcerer's face was all he needed to know, as the blonde answered him, "Yeah, I do," before he could continue further, though a ghostly whale they were in. Making Captain America stand on guard as Crimson Dynamo was slightly freaking out in his restraints as he shouted out, "If you know where we are here." Naruto turned to look at him for a moment as he answered him, "I could, but out of the three of us, I am probably the only one that could survive what happens after America makes two if I give him my protection, but it can only go for so long." Now the two were confused at what he meant, seeing the look. The sorcerer answers their unasked question, "You guys know about heaven and hell, right?" Seeing the continued on, "Then this is Thor's version of hell. We're in Niflheim, the realm of the dead." The moment he said that was when the spirits came forth from everywhere, ready to attack them, but it was for naught as Naruto blasted them away with his magi distraction. He still manages to continue his impromptu lesson, and like every realm, there is always someone watching over it. He looks off to the side as he said, "Oh, you that right, Hela, daughter of Loki and Angerboda, the ruler of Hell and Niflheim." The other two were a little wide-eyed for a bit as a feminine voice echoed throughout the area, well, you are quite knowledgeable, young sorcerer. Despite your interaction with us." All of them turned to see a stairway leading up to a throne where a big brown wolf lay beneath it, and sitting there was a female figure wearing with a mask that had what seemed like hairs standing on each end. The two other than Naruto were a little surprised at how they didn't notice her there, but none decided to ask as Naruto said to her, "I guess that it might be hopeful out of here willingly." Hearing her chuckle was all he needed to know as she answered him, "Of course not, sorcerer. You may be able to come and go as you please due to your status. If N allow you to take the metal man with you as he is still among the living, but the captain on the other hand, I can smell the death on him as his time has been long, like his is as much as worth in gold for you mortals." The two heroes narrowed their eyes at her for a bit as Captain America said to her, "I'm not gonna give my soul yet. I still gotta fight the good fight and my friends now." Hela didn't seem to mind what he said as she said, "Oh, but my dear captain, you should know that gods like us do not do nothing for free now." Naruto wanted to say something, but Captain America beat him to it. "What do you want?" Hela had a smile on her face as she answered him, "If you wish to leave to help your friends and death should claim you in the battle you face, then you're mortal so for all eternity." The soldier narrowed his eyes for a bit before did a counter, "And what's to stop you from joining in just so you yourself could do the deed?" As though she anticipated it, she said to him, "Normally I would have not given you a choice and take my word for it, but it seems that fortune smiles upon you, Captain. The man next to you is an overseer of the supernatural, similar to what your world has in the form of a neutral negotiator among the pantheon should some of them displeasure among each other, and so if you cannot trust my word then you can trust his as should I break it. Then he has the power and means to negate our contract. Him may claim something from me as compensation." The captain turned towards Naruto, who sighed for a bit before nodding a yes to him, and like that, the first Avenger was going to make a life-changing choice for him. Elsewhere, the sounds of battle rages on in Asgard as Loki's forces fought against the Avengers along with Lad. Sif and the rebels. Ant-Man and the Hulk were taking on the Hawkeye and Wasp providing support with their weapons. Ms. Marvel and the rest were barreling through the wave of soldiers with brutal efficiency. They managed to make their way through the front gates via blasting the doors down with everything they got. The next wave of Loki's forces tried to fend them off was defeat as the Hulk descended from the skies and slammed the axe down upon them, sending them flying as Ms. Marvel fired her bolts at them. Black Panther used his hand-to-hand combat as his blades shot forth and found its mark right at them, while Hawkeye sniped them with his bow and arrow. Wasp fire while Ant-Man went big and kicks them aside like bugs. They cleared the wave of soldiers in no time flat as all of them relaxed slightly for a bit, until they felt the ground shake for a bit. Wasp decided to ask another Gia. The Hulk was then one who answered her, feels bigger. It was then the shaking got harder and harder until a figure slowly came into view. The figure then showed itself to be a wolf, but the wolf was about the size of a sk, its fangs and claws ready to tear through anything in its way. Looking at the towering wolf made the Hulk quip out, told you it was bigger. All of them quickly reacted as everyone jumped out of the way of the oncoming paw that nearly smashed them. Ant-Man grew bigger for a bit and tried to grab its maw, slowly turn into ice before he released his grip and fell. The wolf tried to use its arctic breath at him, but the Hulk slammed its face to the side to make it misfire. Ms. Marvel came right at it and punches it right in the nose, forcing it to reel back before she tried again, but this time though a magic laser came out of nowhere and on, sending her to the ground with a sickening thud. Everyone there looked up to see a blonde woman wearing a green strapless dress with a crown on her head, her green elbow-length gloves with thigh-high shoes. What was noticeable was that she had some sort of choker on her neck and her eyes were blank white. Everyone that saw her had prepared themselves for a fight as Hawkeye fired his arrows, all of which were burned into a crisp before she retaliated with a green serp strike. He just barely dodges out of the way before Black Panther tackles him away from the wolf's arctic breath. The Hulk went to grab its attention as it slammed right and went ahead to pull its fur as it make it howl in pain as Ms. Marvel gave it a full-on uppercut. She then fired of her energy blast at the sorceress, but that was blocked by her shield before being retaliated with a torrent of flames. She flew away so as to not ge. Black Panther fired his weapons at her. All of it were blocked by the wolf as it attacked them with a sweep of its paw. All of them managed to dodge from the sweep as the sorceress fired off a shockwave that sent everyone flying backwards. She stayed in the air. Face devoid of any Hawkeye said to Lady Sif, "Who in the world is this chick?" Amora the Enchantress, though it seems that someone has managed to outwit even her of all people, and I suspect that it was Loki's doing. Lady Sif answered him again. They had to avoid the onslaught of the giant wolf and Amora just when things were looking bleak. All of a sudden a familiar-looking shield found its way to the wolf's nose and a hail of blue arrows shot out right into Amora's s. They all turned to see Captain America with his shield and Naruto floating just next to him. Captain America then barked out his orders for the wolf as Naruto went to Amora. The two magic users took to the skies as Captain America rallied his comrades to fight off the wolf. It didn't take long as the Hulk and Ant-Man tipped the wolf over by it. Black Panther attack its mouth and Ms. Marvel, Hawkeye and Wasp attack its eyes. The attack was well coordinated and before long the wolf fell to the might of the Avengers. The moment the wolf fell was when everyone sighs in relief for a bit. Before America said, "All right people, we've got to move. Loki's not gonna wait around, and by the look of things it's getting worse as time passes." Hawkeye decides to then quip out, Cap, not to make you sound like a jerk, but what about? The sounds of thunder within the skies was all everyone there needed to know as Hawkeye looks back at the soldier and said, "Never mind." It was a while later did everyone had an explosive entrance to the throne room. All of them entered to be greeted by the sight of a chained Thor and Loki standing them as he boasted, well, it seems that my brother's friends have decided to show up. Now dear brother, allow me to show you just how weak they truly are." Not intending to back down, Captain America raises his shield and shouted out the very familiar battle cry, "Avengers assemble!" Like that everyone there charged at the trickster god. The first to reach him was Ms. Marvel, but Loki sidestepped her charged before swinging his trident to her back, the balls of his heels to stop Ant-Man from crushing him. In retaliation he fired the frozen Ant-Man right into Black Panther before he destroyed the arrows aimed rigged Captain America through his shield at him, but it was deflected by Loki's magic before he blasted Cap with it, sending the first Avenger back to the ground. Wasp fired her bolts as the Hulk tried to blitz him, but the two were swept aside by his powers. Black Panther tried to sneak attack him, but he was suddenly trapped the trident before a surge of electricity ran throughout his body, causing him to get electrocuted before he was tossed aside. It was then Iron Man burst forth from the ceiling and fired his repulsors at him, but Loki put up a shielded time to block it. He retaliated by firing his own bolts of enter. The suit held firm before Iron Man went to tackle him. It didn't work as Loki summoned a bolt of lightning from the skies and struck Iron Man dead center, forcing TH to the floor. He got back up and tries again, but Loki manages to see it coming as he fires his trident, which struck him dead center mass. It continues. Blast forces him to his knee, a look of glee on his face. What he wasn't expecting was a blast right in his face that sent him skidding back. This was a chance which Iron Man took by firing his but it went through Loki like it wasn't even there, which stunned Iron Man before something struck his back, sending him to the floor as green chains wrapped around Captain America. Once again tries to take him down, but Loki uses his magic to bat him aside like an insect. Seeing the entire group trying to gang up on him, the Tri slams his trident down to create a shockwave that blew everyone back to the floor. Seeing the downed Avengers, the trickster god couldn't help but gloat at them, saying, "Do you see now, mortals, you are nothing before me. With the Odin force I am, and all of you will bow before me." It was then though another voice decided to make himself known. "Sorry Loki, but you need to take a rain check on that." Looking up, the trickster god saw the descending form of Naruto, who had Amora in his arms in a bridal carry as he landed in front of him. Seeing him, Loki decides, the sorcerer. The trickster god then slowly floated up to the roof as he continued on, "I admit, I am impressed at your skills in the mystic arts, but you are a fool now, as I have the Odin force within me and your magic is incomparable to mine." The blonde sorcerer looked amused at his declaration as he levitated Amora into a safe corner before he followed suit as the two look each other face to face as narrate, "Well, then I guess you really don't know me then. Allow me to introduce myself, I am Naruto S. Strange." His eyes suddenly glowed blue with power as the skies darkened and lightning struck as the blonde declared loudly, "And I am the Sorcerer Supreme." To say the least, Naruto was a little impressed at how strong these girls were as he ducked under a flying roundhouse kick before doing a back sweep to the one behind jump to avoid it. Eva came right at him with an axe kick while Keed came right at him with a sliding kick. He smirked for a bit as he did a corkscrew somersault with both his hands their legs before using the momentum to throw both of them away. Mana tried to attack him with her guns, but Naruto leapt back to dodge the bullets before flippin' dodged the kick by Kufei, and then with the grace of an Olympic gymnast, he managed to do a 180 split to kick two robotic arms from punching his lights out. He landed without a fuss before leaning back to avoid a flying kick by Kufei, and following that was him dodging wave after wave of bullets, all of them aiming right. He blocked a punch from Eva with two of his fingers while stopping a roundhouse kick by Shakamaru with his knee. He retaliated by grabbing onto Eva's wrist and into the robot, which sent the two right into Keed, who jumped over the two before she felt a weight on her back before being slammed to the floor with a hard thud. Her clones tried to attack him from all sides, but they were dealt with easily enough as Naruto dispatched of them without much fuss as all of them disappeared after thoroughly beat them. Kufei and Eva came back with a vengeance, but Naruto swiftly dodged, parry and blocked everything they could throw at him, while everyone else not participating at how the teacher in training could do all that, with Chamo and Asakura. Who never thought that Naruto-sensei could do that, said a slightly stunned Asakura as she and Chamo saw the blonde taking 5 of them on without a swee. This and all through the cameras placed throughout the hotel they were in. The Ermin nodded from his position, not letting his eyes leave the screen as he saw the fight going on. He knew of the Sorcerer Supreme, but only through tales, and seeing in action was another thing which made him stare on in both shock and fear at just how powerful the blonde is. It was then though a cheeky voice said to them, "Well, I do try, Miss Kasumi." The two turn around to see said blonde appear from the shadows right behind them with a smirk on his face. The two stare in slight shock for a moment before they forth between the screen and the blonde standing before them until they heard him chuckle. As he answered their unasked question, "Clones, something like your Resi but different in its own way," the two just looks at him in awe for a few more moments until he continued on with a small smirk on his face. "So I see that you two are the ringleaders behind this yours." He could see the two swallow a big lump down their throats while starting to sweat uncontrollably. Naruto couldn't help but mentally pat himself on the back at how he was able to scare people like this, but that wasn't why he was here. Now, any responsible person probably stopped this situation before it got too far, but Naruto wasn't that person as he said to them, "I have to admit it's pretty smart and lucrative, but Miss Kasumi IU that ermine dollars are what it implies, which in reality is practically useless to anyone who isn't an ermine." The moment he said that made Asakura blink for a moment in confusion while Chamo sweated even more, which the blonde caught on as a cerise grin appeared on H, continuing on, "Oh, has the rodent not told you? Sorry to say that those 50,000 ermine dollars he promised you aren't worth anything unless you are a rodent with a stealing female undergarments." Now Asakura was fuming a little as she turned to glare at the rodent, who was now praying to any deity of perversion to save him, while Naruto quipped out, "Now Bifo the little thing here. I like to put some money down on the two best friends, or more specifically Nodoka, for the person to kiss Negi." The two turned back to the blonde in shock at what they had just heard for a moment there, but they couldn't say anything because of it as Naruto chuckle for a bit bef disappear into the shadows, but he decides to leave one last quip, "Oh, by the way, you should look back to Negi's room because it looks like something interesting is happen." The two blink once more before turning back to the monitors to see 5 Negis coming out of nowhere and started to run amok throughout the area. The two turn back to where the Sorcerer Supreme was moments ago, only to see that it was an empty space, which made the two stare at the place for a few impassively before they turned back to the screen where the rest of the girls not fighting the blonde were now chasing the Negi clones, with Naruto. Looks like the swordswoman forgot that Negi isn't well versed in Shinto paper magic, thought the blonde sorcerer as he looks on at his opponents. Keyed Ku-Fei were slightly out of breath while Shakamaru looks on impassively but at the ready, and Eva had a smirk on her face while shaking her hand a little to shake off the sensation in it. The girls minus the vampire and robot were starting to get the picture on just how Naruto got the title, even if they never saw him using his magic, but his hand to H good too. If the way he held them off was any indication, they would have continued on, but they were interrupted when they saw a Negi running past them, which made Ku-Fei widen her eyes in realization as she pointed, "Aw, Negi-sensei, wait up Aru." The Chinese martial artist then quickly took off in a blur to catch up with him, not knowing that it was nothing more than a clone. Seeing her gone made the blonde chuckle for a bit as he said to them, "So, want to see this whole thing turn into a disaster that is going to happen in 5 minutes? Eva smirked for a bit as she nodded while Keed shrugged good naturally as she nodded yes too. Mana just kept silent for a bit as she declined while Shakamaru just all of them headed back to Naruto's room and watched the oncoming train wreck that was soon going to happen. They weren't disappointed as the Negi clones exploded as soon as they were kissed by the various girls, and when the real one came back to answer Nodoka's confi, where everyone in the room minus Shakamaru chuckle and or laugh when the girl was tripped by her best friend and into kissing Negi, they laugh even harder when they saw the other teacher catching everyone responsible for the mess they made and were now watching the people involved minus Room and Mana, who headed back being punished by kneeling in the lobby. A while later, you know, for a so-called prodigy you sure make a lot of interesting situations, said a somewhat amused Naruto, who was now holding the ever-so-important ENV hands while right in front of him was Negi and Asuna, who were in a Seiza position as the two had their heads looking down onto the floor. It was just the next day of the trip, and once again Negi proved that he had the luck of the naive main character, as he along with Asuna and a paper chibi clone of S trapped in an illusion magic while fighting off a dog boy in the middle of it all, while Setsuna had to protect Kanoka in a cosplay outfit, which made him laugh, and that Nodoka had found out about magic, but they didn't know that aside from Naruto, who smirked as he remembered seeing her use her Pakshio in the hallway. It was quite funny when he messed with her mind-reading book by showing intimate pictures between her and Negi, but nothing of the 18 PG category. It was hilarious, so red that he could have sworn that steam would have come out of her Ears either way. For the most part right now is that he was looking at the group of three who were looking down in shame. Seeing this, he just gave a sigh before saying, "Don't be too hard on yourselves. This is just your first mission, and while I'll admit your principal had poor judgment in choosing someone more, guys did fine for your first time out." The three look back up at him with hope in their eyes for a moment until the whole thing came crashing down on them as he continued on. Aside from the fact that notice the enemy until they kidnapped Kanoka, poor environmental situation analysis. Get yourselves beaten up a couple of times, causing a slight fiasco because why? Properly dispose the Shikigami and everything else in between. The blonde took great pleasure in seeing them deflate so quickly, but for the most part he rather not let them have too much of an ego boost, but that wasn't that mood the moment, as he knew they learn with time and experience, but for now they have other things to do. Clapping his hands for a moment to get their attention, he went and said to them, "Now that the pep talk is done, how about we deliver this letter? Meet me at don't let anyone see you, okay?" The three nodded for a moment as the blonde sorcerer just shook his head while chuckling in hopes that they could actually keep a secret, but he doubted that. And just he had predicted that they couldn't stop any others from tagging along, as Asakura, Kanoka and the library trio had somehow managed to hitch a trip with them. The group of 9 was now heading toward the Kansai Magic Association headquarters, which also doubled as Kanoka's home, which was a shock for everyone. Aside before all of them were greeted by the servants of the home. It took a while, but a few minutes later they managed to meet with Kanoka's father, who greeted them. Return the gesture in kind, though Kanoka's father did bow respectfully towards Naruto, much to the confusion of the library trio, but that thought was quickly banished. Were invited to dinner. Dinner was nice for the most part, as all of them went to the hot springs to relax and enjoy the baths there, though once again Naruto did get a laugh off when Negi's father crashed into Setsuna and Asuna, who were hiding themselves. It was then though the other girls came in and saw Negi on top of Asuna in a compromising pose. If it wasn't for the fact that he had met and recognized the signature of every deity, monsters and demons alike, the blonde would have guessed that somewhere someone or something with a penchant for pranks and perversion had placed a curse or spell on the poor boy. After that fiasco, Naruto decides to take a walk down the forest of the estate/headquarters, so to speak. He was wearing his Sorcerer Supreme costume for the MO took in the sights of the tranquil forest. He knew that there were already people here, and he couldn't help but wonder if he and Mavis needed to talk about the Qua mages protecting Japan here. He sighed for a moment before he said out loud, "Come on out. I sensed you guys before you even thought about taking a step into the barrier." After a moment, the bushes and leaves rustle as a few figures emerged from the forest. In total there were about 9 men surrounding the Sorcerer Supreme. Fro then going clockwise, man that has long and spiky blonde hair that reaches down to his lower back. He has a psychotic grin on his face as he shows his teeth. His red of several concentric circles, which further enhance his crazed appearance. He wears a yellow and dark blue skirt-like armor with a red waist ribbon that exposes his chest as well as his right shoulder, where a marked tattoo is located which looks like the skull of a demon with flames surrounding it. Next was another male, which was a fairly tall and lanky young man. He has silver-colored hair in a pompadour style. He wears silver designer glasses and a dark P with a flipped-up collar, completed with a fur trimming. He wears a grayish shirt underneath the jacket that has a belt over it that wraps around his waist. He wears pants and blue shoes. Finally, he sports a pair of white designer gloves, and a stamp is located on a band around his left arm sleeve. Overall he has somewhat of an touch to his appearance. The next one was interesting as it was a tall humanoid, towering over a lot of the people there, who possesses many goat-like traits. His body is covered in short, beef fur, with longer tufts covering his lower face, resembling a goatee, and the back of his legs, which greatly resemble those of a goat, being slightly bent backwards, a dark hooves. He has short, thin ears sitting on top of his head, with a distinctive, elongated oval form, and horns which curve downwards and jut forwards from the head. From his lower back sprouts a mildly long tail ending in a dark tuft of fur, and his fingers sport long and dark nails highly reminiscent of claws. His elongated marked cheekbones and a prominent, large nose, his eyes are always hidden away by a pair of black, mirror-polished shades, which were initially portrayed as heavy separated lenses. With an elongated oval form, the goat-like man donned a distinctive black jacket with short, puffy sleeves, which only covered the upper part of his chest, leaving his muscular abdominal exposed. Similarly shaped, pale yellow shirt, with an extremely short, dark green tie with flat ends tied around his neck. He wore black pants reaching down below his goat K, of their upper sides being adorned by a white motif composed of a stripe going down from his waist and crossed with two more, slightly curved ones, plus a brown line of small circles and closed by an elongated oval buckle. His tail emerged from the back of his pants. He also sported a pair of dark, plain metal armbands. The person next to him was a huge, overweight, yet muscular man wearing a large dark robe-like garment with a lighter-colored spotted design near the top. Unday is bare-chested, although he has two belt-like collars wrapped around him in a crisscross fashion, and wears superhero-looking tights. His skin tone is chalked whi extremely tall, standing at about the same height as the goat man. His hands are extremely large, which he makes good use of in his fighting style. He has shaggy slight sideburns. He has a huge head, a comparatively small face, and a very thick neck. Among the most prominent of his facial features are his large eyebrows, and his thick lips. Moving on was a tall, massive, and highly muscular man with black skin and thick brown hair that looks like long, dark, leathery strips of confetti jutting out in all. He has brown eyes and long sideburns, joining his hair to his prominent goatee, which takes the form of several triangles pointing downwards and extending upwards. Also has a straight dark streak running over his left eye, which extends up to the top of his forehead and down to his mid-cheek. Each of his ears is adorned by a lush shaped like a round crescent moon pointing down. He wears an outfit decorated by tribal-like motifs, complete with what looks like leather armor covering his upper body. The chest piece is simple, with the central S highlighting his prominent abdominals and pectorals, underneath it being light green, separated by the dark green parts on his sides by a pair of thin white lines fra edges. The V-shaped part around the neck is instead black. With the chest piece comes a pair of large, dark-colored shoulder pads, complete with lighter-colored massive straps hanging from them, each decorated by similarly large hollow studs. The left shoulder pad bears the symbol like the first one's tattoo around his Y-plane belt, distinguished by the dark motifs on it, below it. The leather armor continues in a waistguard composed of four large, semicircular flaps, each decorated by to the one on his shoulder pads, and retaining the color scheme of his chest piece. The arms are covered by loose, light green sleeves, with a darker green band CR them, closed by a stud identical to those adorning the rest of his attire, and darker colored stripes framing the areas where the sleeves open laterally to reveal part forearms. His pants, while orange in color, retain the same structure of the sleeves, with the lower parts being slashed on the front, where they are framed by gris overlooked by studded bands. The sides of such pants, in addition, are adorned by a series of dark motifs running down their entire length, visible from the slash's white boots. The guy after that was just as well built as the previous one, as he had black eyes and hair which is kept short and styled into a number of spiky strands pointing some prominent spikes topping his forehead. His thin sideburns reach down to the stubble covering the majority of his chin. He has a sharp face, marked facial feet wrinkles below his eyes, as well as a long scar extending from his hairline to his lower left ear, while both of his ears are adorned by silver-colored earrings, consistent with a little chain ending in a cross pendant. He seems to be wearing a black, closely fitting shirt, with a thick, gray fur collar, as well as light gray oversleeves reaching to his upper arm with hem secured by double stitching. The back of his shirt bears a light motif consisting of a circle with a segmented, upwards arc below it. Hanging from Silver's waist and covering his dark yellow, tassel-like cloths, he wears brown gloves over his hands and forearms and has his dark brown, baggy pants tucked inside brown boots. Over his shirt, segmented metal chest plate, bearing the writing Absolute Zero, on the left pectoral. Secured to it by two round, golden clasps is a long, brownish-white cape hangman's shoulders. Silver's armor is completed by two blue, rounded pauldrons, possessing metal-colored edges and squared protrusions on the upper and lower edge adorned by a golden symbol. Sitting on the tree was yet another person who appears to be a young male with animal-like traits, his dark blonde hair, reaching down to his shoulders and covering his face, perpetually hiding his left eye from sight. Juts upwards on top of his head in a pair of prominent protrusions shaped like ears. His nose is small and black-lit. He has a furry tail protruding from his lower back, colored the same as his hair, and pointed, triangular fang-like teeth. His one visible eye, complete with a dark slit, thick dark outline, and black spots are present both below it and above its linear eyebrow. Jackal's forearms and hands are covered by a larger variety of similarly getting closer and closer in position as they approach his wrists, in correspondence to which they fuse together to leave his hands completely black. Following his recour, Jackal's appearance remains largely unchanged, with only his tail's shape being different, having gotten noticeably more thick and furry. Like an actual jackal, his second attire reveals his legs as animal-like appendages, covered in light fur and sporting dark claws instead of toes, placed in a grappling position. His previous footwear prevents from knowing whether this was their original appearance, with a mark that is visible on his now bare right pectoral. The male wears a striped tank top on his torso, paired with a brownish bandana adorned by pale yellow spots circling his neck. Arranged to form some sort of collar together with the main part makes for three ends left hanging downwards. He sports a blue garb around his waist, secured by a large knot with hanging edges on T-split in two tails on the back, each adorned by a series of dark rectangles near their lower edges. His pants, reaching down below his knees, are noted for being ext and baggy, while mainly whitish beige in color. They sport blue sections on the thighs front and on the calves back, the latter ones reaching to the clasp-like ornament correspondence to each knee. His outfit is completed by plain black boots with light soles. After that was a short, round, humanoid creature, with his most noticeable feature being a single eye under the helmet he dons, which hides the rest of his upper F. Noticeable feature of it is that he lacks ears, and possesses three small holes on the side of his head instead. He also dons a cheerful, grinning expression most of T edition. He has a necklace and various body paintings around his neck. Along with the helmet, the creature's shoulders are protected under shoulder plates. The C appearance is completed by a rod, which is used by the creature to walk. Also, his arms' colors change between yellow and red in a striped form, and also where Ma pants form weird to weirder was the last one who dresses in form-fitting robes with a high collar. The robe itself has a checkered pattern, and covers a collared shirt and thing wears beneath. Around his face and on his head, it wears an ornate head-piece, revealing a mark, covering his jaw and fanning out over his head almost like. Notably though is that it does not have a human face. Instead, his body seems to be that of a skeleton, with keys possessing no nose, eyes, or skin. The blonde sorcerer merely gave all of them a passing glance as he said to them, well, looks like the brat's master got some back up for him. It does beg the chew, what did the brat's master pay to get 9 of the 12 vanguards of purgatory? None of the 9 there showed any emotion of them being figured out as the blonde said to him cockily, so you know of us good less trouble of introducing going to kill you amuse. The blonde closed his eyes and chuckled for a bit as he said to him, kill me. Looks like someone's got a big head just because he was taught some so-called magic, which personally is a joke, but if it's a fight you lot want. Slowly, the Sorcerer Supreme opened his eyes, showing his sapphire-colored eyes that showed power and demand respect before continuing on as the wind blew then it's an ass-kicking all of you going to get, 4 days later, so. Mind telling me what are you doing here, Irene? Asked a curious Sorcerer Supreme as he calmly enjoyed his tea while raising an eyebrow at his current guest. Said guest just gave a sly grin as she crossed her luscious long legs for a bit before she answered him, well that's because it's been so long since I've been here and besides. Word is that you've got yet another apprentice and makes a lot of people wonder just how good she will be in the near future since she is taught by you of the blonde sorcerer. Just chuckle lightly as he know what she meant by that, and since today he along with his wives and Amora were going to hang out with her at tea with a few other people from the mansion. He figured that his first and probably most powerful apprentice was keeping an eye on her. The moment she heard Wisp being his next apprentice, he didn't mind too much after all. The only ones that would dare come after him or his apprentices are the wannabes and the hot shots that think they could do WH just because they got some magic in their arsenal. So with a chuckle he decided to agree to let her come with them, if only just so that Alexia could have a someone senior role model for her. But before she could whoop in joy, she was quickly covered by a pink mist, and then all of a sudden her normal attire changed into that of turtleneck sweater and a pair of hip-hugging long jeans, while her hair was now free-flowing and cascaded down her back. She blinks for a bit as she looks down at her now new clothing before looking back towards the blonde with a raised eyebrow at him. Seeing the look, Naruto knew to ask, so he decides to answer her unasked question. Well, I'm sure that you would like to show off a lot, but I don't think the mail company from the mansion will hour if they saw you in your normal attire before we even get to the beach. She seemed to contemplate that for a while before shrugging, as she figured that it was this or not go at all, so she didn't mind that as the two went to find the rest group to meet up before Alexia and some of the X-Men arrives. A while later the doorbell to the mansion of the Sorcerer Supreme rang out, even though the people known of their arrival before they reached the doors. Deciding to be a little flamboyant, the Sorcerer Supreme made the doors open themselves as he walked towards with his hands behind his back, while the girls followed behind him. Looking on at the group, he couldn't help but crack a smile on his face as he saw Alexia's eyes filled with wonder and intrigue at the whole thing. The group that she with consisted of Aurora, Piotr, Kitty, Jean, Scott and Evan from the X-Men. It was interesting enough that they had about half of the original group come, but he figured could come, then it means that they ones at the mansion could handle any threat. Though what was interesting was the group that came after. Sure, he felt them the moment they entered his security system, but to see them here with his very eye surprising. After all, it's not every day that you see the Fantastic Four right in front of your doorstep. Yep, that's right, Reed Richards, Susan Storm Richards, Johnny Ben Grimm, along with two very awe-struck kids, which surprisingly enough were the kids of Reed and Susan, and sure enough Franklin and Valeria was there, Franklin holding onto his mother's hand while Valeria was in her arms, as the two look on in awe at the mansion. Supreme couldn't help but give a smirk as he saw the look on the kids' faces, but nevertheless he couldn't help but welcome them in saying, welcome to my home. Your trip here was well. The X-Men were more than kind enough to reciprocate the welcome, as Aurora said to him. It was nice enough, though Alexia here just couldn't wait till we reach her on asking if we were there yet all the way from the mansion. He chuckled a little at what she had just said to him as Alexia turned bright red at it, while Aurora giggled a little. Once he calmed down a little, he went ahead and introduced Fantastic Four. I'm actually surprised seeing the famed Fantastic Four right here and now. May I dare ask, why are you all here for? Susan was the one who answered him first. Well, at first we didn't plan on coming, but it seems that Alexia became fast friends with Franklin here, and when she invited, we thought it would be fun for the whole family to have a relaxing time for once. It was then thought Johnny Storm decided to chip into the conversation. Yeah, the squirt wanted all of us to come, so we did, since there wasn't anything going on in nowadays. But I have to admit, you got one swanky place here, man. Think I could rent this out for a party or two sometimes? Naruto couldn't help but chuckle for a bit, as even as Susan berated her younger brother for saying something like that, as the blonde said to them, well, I hope that I brought your swimwear, and if not, then along Wong here to show you the clothes room, so to speak, where you can pick out whatever you like from the room. Johnny couldn't help but grin as he said, sweet, before he suddenly had a question on his mind as he said out loud, so how are we all going to get there anyways? I probably prepared for the X-Men, but with us around I don't think we could fit, especially with Big Lug over here. A growl echoed as Ben Grimm was about to tear a new one in the Human Torch, until Naruto said to him, I wouldn't worry about that, Mr. Storm. I'm sure that we see there without any trouble. The blonde pyrokinetic looked at him dubiously as for a moment before he shrugged and said, fine by me, I guess since you know magic you probably can teleport with a few words, right? The Sorcerer Supreme just looked at him with a hint of amusement on his face as he gave a slight jab towards his fellow blonde. Well, not a phase, Storm, but how about a door? the hot head of the Fantastic Four raised a curious eyebrow at the meaning of his word for a moment before the blonde sorcerer motioned for everyone there to follow while as the group traverses the seemingly large interior of the mansion until all of them reach a certain place with 3 glass doors right before them. From the left seemed to be a forest of sorts while the middle was that of a desert and lastly on the right was a snowy mountain. Johnny whistles for a bit as he commented out, "Wow, you must be really loaded to have this kind of screen." All he got in return was a grin from the Sorcerer Supreme moment before Naruto twisted the knob in the middle of the door and there everyone saw the picture changed from a desert into a beach in a blink of an eye and B could comment on that. Naruto decided to open the door and there everyone was blasted by a wave of cooling sea breeze which stunned a few of them slightly as T Supreme smirked slightly before heading into the door. The women from the mansion followed soon after and oddly enough all of them including Naruto had magically changed into their swimwear. The adults seemed to for a moment there but the kids weren't as Alexia and Franklin ran into the doorway with smiles on their faces as they met up with the people on the other side. It was only when Valeria was moving about in Susan's arms did the invisible woman snap out of it first as she tried to calm her daughter down for a bit as Reed said he somehow managed to create a doorway that probably resonates to places he desires. The knob probably acts as a switch that if turned could connect to anywhere. World fascinating. The heart and soul of the Fantastic Four could only shake her head at her husband's antics before she along with the rest of the group were guided into the changing Asian man. It took a while but everyone there was already having fun in their swimwear. All the men wore swim shorts while the women here all wore different kind. Naruto was relaxing on the beach along with Aurora who wore a white 2-piece high-waist swimsuit along with a sarong wrapped around her waist as she lounged reading a book. The two weren't alone as next to the Sorcerer Supreme was Amora as she wore a green high Polish pendant strappy 2-piece swimsuit but she had described as an annoyed look on her face as the three look on at the rest who were enjoying themselves. The kids were building a sandcastle with Kitty and Jean while Evan and Johnny were competing in a surfing contest. Reed and Susan were just lounging about like tea as they look on at their kids enjoying themselves. Scott became a referee to an arm wrestling match between Ben and Pyotr while Clea and Shizuka were playing in IR. Ian was with them moments ago but she appeared before Naruto in her black overlay push-up swimsuit and looked down at him as she said, "So master, mind tellin' didn't let the security system handle the incoming intruders?" All she got was a small smirk as he said to her, "Well, let's just say that this is a late welcome home present for you." He tilted his sunglasses down so she could see blue eyes and continued on, "After all, I'm sure being cooped in that room doing those creator awful paperwork might be quite stressful for you, so why don't you ha with them?" The redhead blinks for a bit at what she heard her master just said before a full-blown feral grin appeared on her face before she started walking back towards that she could greet the new arrivals personally. Aurora couldn't help but raised a curious eyebrow at what she had just heard as she voiced out her concerns to him. "Are you sure about sending her alone to deal with that is coming?" He looks towards the weather goddess for a moment before giving her a grin as he answers her question. "Don't let her appearance judge you, Ms. Monroe. That WOM was my first apprentice and arguably the most powerful among others that have trained under me, so she could handle them, and if not, Wong will be there to help. She'll need it. Because of that though, the question you should be asking is whether or not can the enemy survive her." All that posed from her was more questions but Aurora held her tongue knowing that she'll probably won't get more out of the Sorcerer Supreme anytime soon. Front entrance of the mansion. "Wow. This place is really big on the inside," said a slightly awestruck girl as she along with 3 others entered the mansion of the Sorcerer Supreme. The person, a young-looking female wearing a white-colored briefs with a black line positioned in the middle, arm warmers, a revealing vest with a high collar and thigh-high, she seemed to have a small black hole in the middle of her body and what seemed to be a helmet on her head with the left horn looks as if it has been cut off and the mask covers her left eye. Her right eye is light pink, with the left eye covered by her mask and a flame design over the eye hole, and she also has light green very basic manner. Hi, how about we get this done quick so I can go back to sleep," said a somewhat tired voice as the girl turned to look at him angrily and said, "Come on Stark, they gave us this job so we have to do it right, though sending 3 Espada and Jin here is a little overkill for a search and retrieve, don't you think?" The now named Stark could only sigh slightly at her antics. Stark has blue-gray eyes and wavy, dark brown hair, which ends at the base of his neck. is always parted down the middle. He has a faded goatee while he wears a white jacket outlined in black, though altered with the collar upturned. A black sash is worn in AM to a matador around his waist and he wears white gloves. He also has a mask that consists of a fanged bottom jaw which is positioned along his neck. A hole could sternum, right below the tip of his mask. Another person came up next to Stark as he said to the group, "Well, Eisen does rate his power to be quite high, so it mostly just caution in case of any worst case. The person has eyes narrow to slits along with an unusually thin and tall with very sharp features, giving him a skeletal appearance, and bears unusual silver high set in a wide mocking smile. He wore a white hakama as his robe open in a narrow V down to his waist, closed to below the hips, and then open again to the hem, about to mid-calf. His robe has long bell sleeves, into which he hides his hands while the lining of the robe and edges or layers of the underrobe appear to be black. It was then yet another figure stood out from the rest of them, but this one did not say anything to the conversation. The figure was a woman with olive skin, aqua eyelashes, and short golden blonde hair, which she keeps messy with 3 braided locks. She wears a jacket with a high collar, which covers the lower part of her while bearing a good portion of the lower half of her large breasts. The jacket has a zipper running along its entire length, which is open from the bottom upwards, air filter on either side just below the trim. The jacket's sleeves completely envelop her arms, terminating in black glove-like extensions at her extremities, resemble appearance of a cat's paw. Another person then decided to voice out his opinion, and not in a good way, to the females of the group. "I don't give a damn, even if this place is powerful, but I do here could take me on, so don't worry about it, but I guess you ladies can't help but be scared because that's all you can do anyways." The 2 females of the group growl slightly at the man's attitude as the last of their group step into the mansion. The last of the group was a very tall man with a T-body. His face is frequently set in a huge smile which reveals his upper teeth. His black hair hangs past his shoulders, concealing the left side of his face and a large patch with one exposed dark gray eye. His clothing consists of a modified jacket with an overblown spoon-like hood and an opening starting at the neckline, shown midsection, and closing at his waist. He wears the standard hakama, but the ends of his pant legs close inside extended and curved boots. On his shoulder was a G-weapon bearing 2 crescent moon-shaped blades fused together at the backs, with a large looped chain connected to the shaft at the end of the handle with a cha to his waist. To say the least, the last of their group seemed a little agitated as he shouted out, "God damn it, just how the hell are we going to find the damn thing in this place?" It was then though a seductive voice said out to them, "Oh, and what makes you think that any one of you are going to leave this place alive?" Everyone there widened their eyes for a moment as they tense up for battle before looking up towards the voice. From there they saw Irene in her battle attire sitting with a smile on her face, but that was accompanied by a predatory look in her eyes which unnerved some of them. Though it seems that the last member of their grow to threaten as he mocked the red head. Well, what we have here, someone who doesn't know her place. Take my advice, woman, and get lost before you get REA." All he got in return was a few giggles from the first apprentice of the Sorcerer Supreme before Irene dropped from the railings and descended to the ground. But feet touched the ground though was when everything around them changed. The intruders could only widen their eyes as the entire area they were in suddenly became as though the world itself was like a glass. It was then they all turned to Lo was now slowly walking down the steps before stopping a few feet away from them. She felt a little smug as she saw all of them tense up for a fight which she thou her mind as she then said to them, "Like it, this is what we of the mystic user call the mirror world. A place out of place and time where we can do anything in here. World remains unaware of what happens here." She didn't get to say much more as the last member of the group charged head first, ready to decapitate her with his weapon. All the sorceress did was smile. Sudden all of the intruders fell upwards, so to speak, and only just barely realign themselves to land on the ceiling. The intruders look up from their position to see Irene standing on the floor despite the fact that it became a ceiling in their point of view, but they weren't thinking. Irene looked up from her position with eyes that seemed to pierce their very core and said to them, "Well, hope you guys can stay alive because I might be sad if at the beach, Lying on his back, the Sorcerer Supreme couldn't help but give a smile on his face for no apparent reason other than the man himself knows. But nevertheless but ask him, I hope you don't mind me asking Mr. Strange, but how did you end up as who you are now? Naruto gave her a small smile on his face as he answers her question jokingly. Wow, you really love to hit it deep, don't you? The weather goddess thought that it was something personal as she quickly apologized. I'm sorry if it is too much, I was just curious is all. The blonde just waved her off for a bit as he said to her, no worries, how about this though? I tell you my story if you tell me yours, what do you say? Ororo looked on at the blonde sorcerer and thought about it for a moment as she too was curious just a tad bit about him. She was slightly apprehensive about telling, which Naruto noticed, which he then reintegrate his words, if you don't want to you can just tell me how you end up in the X-Men and I'll tell you how I ended up be Sorcerer Supreme minus a few stuff here and there. The weather goddess was silent for a few moments until she gave a hesitant nod towards the blonde, who smiled for a bit as he put both arms behind his head while the ground before he started his story. Well, before I became the badass I am today, I was just run-of-the-mill badass surgeon. The way he started it made Ororo raise an eyebrow at his flamboyant way of starting his story, but she held her tongue as the blonde continued on with a smirk on H. Yes I know, but I just can't help myself. Anyways, a few years in and a few hundred or so cases that I have proudly done without any incident was a tragic day, but a day I was thrust into the mystic world. She was getting a little interested as the Sorcerer Supreme continued on his story. That very accident was caused when a monster appeared right in front of my CA, caused me to have an unfortunate accident which cost me the use of both my hands. The weather goddess gasped for a bit as she was shown a picture of his hands after the accident, and for some reason Shizuka was unable to heal him at the time. Whi later on theorized that due to the nature of magic in this world had affected the Biju in some way. Nevertheless, though it didn't stop him from becoming what he is. The story going, in time I nearly lost all hope of ever curing my hands until I found myself in Tibet after hearing of a guy being miraculously healed after being para waist down, and after that was, shall we say, history, as what you see today was a result of that faithful day I stepped into that place. Ororo could see the nostalgic look that the blonde had on his face, which made her blush slightly at just how he looked before shaking those thoughts aside. For Mo said, I see. Mine is probably slightly less interesting than yours, but since you told me yours then I shall tell you mine. It was then though she saw his undivided attention on her as the blonde lay on his side with one hand propping up his head while the other lay flat on his side. The fact that he had his glasses removed showed just how much this Adonis was in the eyes of the weather goddess, who blushed beet red at how he looked right now. She eventually managed to calm down enough so she could tell her story to him about how she was an orphan on the street stealing just to survive until she bump in turn help her with things that she would not say for now, to becoming one of the X-Men today. In that time Naruto kept silent, but interested look on his face as his piercing blue eyes never left her form, which was embarrassing to the weather goddess, but she enough so she could finish her story, and by then she knew that he was listening intently at every word she said. But before two could say anything else, Alexia came towards the blonde and started to whine to him, Mr. Strange, Mr. Storm and Mr. Daniels are being mean to me. The two look on at the girl who was now pouting before they look back at the two who was grinning slightly as Johnny said to them, hey, don't look at us. Kid said surf the big waves, but we aren't going to let her do that. The two surfers just chuckled for a bit before they headed back to continue surfing, leaving the two adults plus one kid as Amora was dragged by Clea and Shizuka as her feel left out. The two adults there couldn't help but chuckle as they saw Alexia whining about wanting to surf but couldn't. It was then though the sorcerer super small gleam in his eyes which made Ororo knew he was about to do something to the two. She was proven true when Naruto said to his newest apprentice, say Alexia, want to show those clowns who's boss? Alexia nodded her head so fast you could have sworn that her head would have fallen off, which made the two chuckle at how cute it seems. Before Naruto got up on himself for a moment before Alexia grabbed his hand and tried to drag him to hurry up. The amusing smile on the sorcerer's face was enough for the weather goddess. He was enjoying this. She was about to see what was about to happen until she saw a hand being held out to her. Following the hand, she saw that Naruto held it out to her with a smile as he said to her, come on now, Why don't the three of us show those brats how to really sue? She looked a little shocked at what he was proposing, and for a second she hesitated until she smiled and took his hand before the three headed off to do whatever they are planning. A little further off was Clea, Shizuka and Amora enjoying the sun with the last one, albeit reluctantly since she was dragged by the two to do so. The white-haired sorceress had a smile on her face as she said to Shizuka, "Well, it seems we might have another harem sister in the midst, don't you think?" All she got was a light giggle as the QB answered her, "Maybe, but who knows, maybe even the prude here might also take up the role too. Creator knows we any considering his stamina." Amora on the other hand couldn't help but blush just slightly, but she still manages to retort, "What makes you think that I would even join with a human of all things?" All she got was a gleam in the eyes of the two, and for some reason she felt a cold chill down her spine as though the two knew something about her, but she couldn't about it since the two could spin the tale anyway they pleased. Evan and Johnny on the other hand weren't aware of what the sorcerer was planning. As the two had fun surfing the next wave they managed to come across, it was they heard the sounds of a child laughing. The two turned towards the source, only to have their eyes widen when they saw Alexia passing by them laughing all the W. Not the surprising thing they saw, because she was riding on the shoulder of one Naruto. As strange, while the girl was touching the water, and for Evan, he had his jaw as he saw his aunt sitting on the other shoulder while also having a good time. Said sorcerer on the other hand was laughing all the way as he was surfing the wave bare feet, further stunning the two so much that they couldn't stay on their boards and thus fell off when the wave crashed into them. The three looked back to see the two being wiped out by the waves, which brought on another bouts of laughter from them as they saw the two come out of the water. Sorcerer Supreme made his way towards the two with his passengers in tow. To say the least, the three were very amused at how the two were right now with Alexia. Them. Johnny was the first to voice out his situation. Yeah, we get it. We won't say mean things to her again." All the two got was another bits of chuckling before Naruto surf off despite being on still water, and just enough so that he could splash the two so the three could h fun. A while later Irene came back, though some could see that she was a little out of breath for some reason, but she waved it off as training which only Naruto, Clea and why she was that way, while the rest remain oblivious to it. Sometime later, after everyone had their fun while the kids were getting tired, aside from Alexia, was enough for everyone to call it quits for now. So with that, the FA along with Valeria and Franklin said their goodbyes before heading off back to the tower, while the X-Men there stayed for the night since it was quite late and none in the mood for the boring trip back home. All of the X-Men along with Amora decided to retire to their given rooms at the time, while Naruto, Clea, Shizuka and very chipper Alexia headed off into another room, basically the basement, aside from the fact that the basement had creator knows how many floors and rooms, which some of them were under heavy bolt and chain. Makes you wonder what's in there. How the group manages to reach a certain room within the basement, and they're all of them headed in to see Irene there on lying the couch with one of her arms on the couch with a book in hand as she hummed a tune while reading said book. That was not as amusing as the three that were sitting on chairs facing the sorceress. Enough were 3 of the 5 intruders from this morning, who were the 2 females of the group and the one with brown hair named Stark. The other 2 of the G barely made it out of there, though they had a few souvenirs to go with their trip to the mansion, while leaving the 3 here to their fates. The 3 on the other hand looked like they went 10 rounds with the Hulk and just barely survive. All things considered, they wanted to try and escape, but that PLA tremendously when the door didn't even budge an inch no matter how much they tried, and after a while they gave up knowing there was no escape. Even more so the redhead coming back into the room and told them that her master wants to have a few words with them. So here they were trying to think off a way out, but no plan came to mind, since all things considered, if the apprentice was enough to take all 5 of them on without trouble, then what about her master? It was thought alone that prevented them from doing anything rash until they hear the doors open to see 3 adults and walking into the room. Irene decided to get up from the couch so that Naruto could take a seat. The Sorcerer Supreme took his seat right in front of the 3 with Alexia sitting on his lap, a seat to his right, while Shizuka sat on the arm rest on his left. Irene just stood behind him while the group just looked on in amusement at the 3 who suddenly they felt the power coming off the adults, which frightened them slightly. It was then though Naruto decided to speak first. Now this is interesting. It has been a while since I saw a hollow, but I must admit that this is a first that I see one appearance of a human, so I am curious, what do they call you? The olive-skin woman was the one to answer him after a tense silence. "We are called Arankar, which is what happens when a hollow removes his or her mask and G-powers to the Shinigami." The other girl of the group couldn't help but have her jaw drop in shock at what her comrade just answered. The blonde sorcerer. She turns back to see said sorcerer leave his seat while contemplating something for a few moments before he said to them, "Arankar, Spanish for to tear off. It fits all things considered, so now that's mind telling me your names." The girl was about to tell him off until she heard Stark answering him, "Name's Coyote Stark. The troublesome girl next to me is Lilynette Gingerbuck and next to H. Harabelle." Lilynette couldn't help but be shocked at how he just revealed their names like that and was about to shout at him, but it was then she noticed that Stark had a serious face while seeing him sweat, albeit just slightly. But that was more than enough for her to tell that something was wrong, and only the two beside her knew. "What be you going to question it?" As she looks back to see the blonde smirking at them as he said to them, "So are you going to tell me what were you guys hoping to find here or resort to other measures to get it?" Lilynette manages to regain some wit in her, which she jumps out of her seat and pints at him while saying, "We're not going to tell you anything, so go ahead." "Do you?" All she got was a feral grin from the Sorcerer Supreme, which made her shiver slightly in fear before she was roughly pulled back by Stark, who along with Tier 10s might be their last confrontation, but what they weren't expecting was for the blonde to laugh at them for a few moments before he said to them with amusement, "It seems that the little Spitfire underestimate the potential of magic, no matter, and since Alexia here hasn't had the initiation for the introduction of the mystic whirl, show all of you just what you have stepped into. It'll be killing 2 dragons with 1 spell." The blonde flared his magic for a moment as he started his speech towards the people there. Magic is mysterious in its own way. From there the 3 intruders along with Alexia were somehow teleported into a dark void, with the only ones there being them alone as they heard Naruto's voice. "The void, it is everywhere yet nowhere at the same time." All of a sudden their bodies shot up into the air of the void with speeds that would have broken the speed barrier. While Naruto continued on, mystic users in all walks of life draw forth magic in their own ways. The 4 suddenly stop, which was then they noticed that they were in space of all places with the earth just below them before all of them went for another ride as by an unknown force with such speed. While still hearing Naruto talking, it has brought forth a host of ways and methods to being used, whether in this dimension or other dimensional worlds. All of them were now being dragged to see multiple planets hovering there before the scenery changed once again, some bright and good as the very light themselves. It showed a world filled with creatures of all kinds, beautiful yet tranquil in their environment before changing into something else, while others as dark and vile as the darkness itself. The next scene they saw was now changed into a dark barren land with dark clouds that darkened the skies, and all around were hideous and savage monsters roaming. "So you tell me, what do you think is reality? The one that you are living in right now?" All of them somehow landed back to Earth, though right in the middle of a bustling city and right in the middle of oncoming traffic from all sides, but strangely Inu seemed to notice them. "Or is it something beyond that you see here?" It was then the entire city was flipped upside down, which in turn made all of them fall downwards or upwards depending on their point of view before all of them ride as they saw multicolored tunnel before them before being dragged into it like a roller coaster. "So you tell me what reality is, because with magic the impossibilities are endless." "So as long as you know the way how." All of them were still being dragged into the tunnel, which Lilynette screamed all the way through while Alexia screamed but in joy as the remaining 2 had adrenaline the veins in overdrive as another voice said out to the Sorcerer Supreme, "Their heartbeat is going through the roof." Just like that they were all back into the room, but this time though Naruto went in between Lilynette and Stark with amusement on his face and said, "Oh, I think they're just fine." Before anyone could say anything else, the 4 were being pulled back into the roller coaster ride into the tunnel as images of dragons, different worlds, magic use gods, demons, and everything they could see as Naruto continued his speech. "The moment you step into this world, you better be prepared for what comes next, because even if you are in other places in the mystic world, doesn't mean that come for any reason at all." And it was then they all started to fall from the tunnel with the 2 girls screaming all the way despite the different reasons for it as Naruto ended his speech. "Welcome to the rabbit hole, ladies and gentlemen. I don't expect any of you to leave peacefully anytime soon." It ended with the 3 intruders being slammed backwards from their seats and fell on their backs while Alexia was in Naruto's laughing all the way as she kept on say again. The three intruders managed to shakily got back up, but one could see the toll it took on them, so Naruto decided to let them calm down for a bit before they took th again, but one could see that all of them were a little more submissive than before that trip, so to speak. Before Naruto said to them, "So are you going to tell me or do you have another go again?" The blonde took great pride knowing that he still had it when it comes to intimidating certain people, as he heard the three intruders telling him of what they were do. The end of it all, what those three said, could forever change their world, so to speak. 2 days later, Reunited, the capital place within Soul Society that could be described as the pride of the Shinigami residing there, as all of them knew that none could pass these while what was being built here. That was before a substitute Shinigami shattered their perspective by barging in head first to save one who was being wrongfully imprisoned, which in turn unveiled that it threats outside that brought its wake-up call, but one from within, as they were betrayed by 3 of their own before the leader took something of great power from leaving the place by leaving a trail of destruction as a distraction. Since then the Shinigami had to rebuild and reorganize their ranks in the aftermath of it all. It was here we see the famed Gotii 13. The strongest among the Shinig pursue all evil and erase them from Earth and Reunited, but now they face what could be described as their greatest challenge this time around, as not only has some betrayed them but also being dealt a great blow which wounded their pride as protectors, but in the end none of them could or want to act unless given to by one Shigekuni Yamamoto, the captain commander of the Gotii 13. Right now all the captains were in deep discussion on how to react after the betrayal from some of their own, and none seemed to work in their favor, as there were parts in each plan while the enemy has been a step ahead of them all the way. Before anyone could say anything else though was when a portal suddenly opened up right in the middle of them, making all of them jump back in surprise with th drawn, and it was then they saw who it was, and boy they all felt it, as the person released a Ryatsu that so potent and powerful some of them thought they were in Yamamoto himself, but this one seemed to have further surpassed his own, as all of them managed to see who it was once the portal was closed up, and all of them Cowl person was not happy in the slightest, because there was Mavis Vermilion, and boy is she livid with eyes glaring at Yamamoto. Elsewhere, Hueco Mundo, a seemingly never-ending white desert, with a multitude of dunes, littered with boulders. In Hueco Mundo, the moon is on the opposite lunar phase human world. The vast desert seems to lack any bodies of water and contains rocky formations. It was here that just a few ways from the capital city named Las Noches that a portal suddenly opened up, and there 5 people step out from it. One was Irene as normal attire to battle. It was then one of the 4 that accompanied her decided to ask, "Too bad that your master isn't going to join us. I would love to see the Sor in action, even if it is with these Arankar." The one that said it was a buxom young woman with a slender figure. Her wavy, blonde hair is cropped short, reaching only the base of her nape. It is quite messy, somewhat spiky appearance. While it is mostly swept back, some bangs hang down her forehead, curving away from the face on either side. Her brown eyes droop with a mark on her left calf. Her attire is quite revealing, as her top consists of a simple brown bandeau, with the upper edge embroidered with a flowery, white lace. She also wears loose, pince pants, the ends of the legs tightening around her calves. The hems of the legs are decorated with dark piping. Her left forearm is covered by a tight, dark bracer Y ornament attached to it beneath her elbow. Her right arm is encased in golden armor. While the part covering her upper arm and shoulder is plated, the rest takes simple gauntlet. Her neck is protected by gorget with a golden border and whose color matches that of her bandeau. A dark jacket with a light border is tied around, allowing it to flare out behind her legs such that it hides her legs from view from behind but leaves them exposed from the front. The jacket has a large collar and L are knotted loosely below her abdomen, the ends hanging down. The light cuffs are quite prominent and each is encircled by a dark band with 3 rows of studs. She completes her outfit with a pair of simple sandals. Her attire exhibits minor modifications when she goes to war. Her spalder is not as spiky and has her emperor engraved on it, while the ornament adorning her bracer sports 2 miniature wings instead of 1. The lace lining her bandeau is also replaced by a chain. All Irene did was gave the woman a smile as she said to her, "Well, Master did promise his new apprentice that he would spend some time with her, and break a promise unless absolutely necessary. The blonde woman just shrugged before cracking her knuckles and then said out loud, "Oh well, more for us than right." All she got was a giggle from Irene as they along with the three got ready to invade Los Noches. To say the least, Naruto was intrigued that the brat's master had managed to hire not one, not two but 9 of the 12 vanguards of Purgatory. He knew who they were. His job is to recognize any and probably all of any threats from the supernatural world. Sure, there were a few wannabes here and there, like that Mysterio guy that fought the new kid Spider-Man a while back, but he was all smoke and mirrors kind of goo kid. Have him. For now he just looks on at the group surrounding him with a critical eye, as all things considered they are in the most wanted list. As he looks at them center going clockwise, Zankro, the so-called fire god slayer Rusty Rose, a man who's said to be able to create anything with his imagination, Capricorn, or in his true form Zoldio, a man who's been taking over and enslaving a lot of ODs over the years, which slightly pissed the blonde off a little at how he the celestial spirit Kane Hikaru, an obese man with the ability to control people with his dolls Azuma, a man able to control any and all plant life Silver Fullbuster, the ice devil slayer Jackal, a humanoid cat being with the ability to create explosions Franmoth, a demon with the powers over souls and magic via contact. Lastly is Keys, a necromancer who could reanimate almost anyone from the dead. No words was said as the group of 9 that surround the Sorcerer Supreme get ready to fight him. The first to attack was Zankro as he launched himself straight at Fist in case in black flames. Before the punch could connect though was when all of a sudden the blonde fire god slayer felt a stinging sensation on his cheek before out of bounds when he saw his teammates upside down before landing face first onto the ground. Just like that, the whole thing started off the entire brawl as Zoldio summoned out a horde of knights armed with spears to attack him. Seeing them, the Sorcerer Supreme stomped one of his foot to the ground, and there the ground exploded, with spikes made of earth encompassing the area, and stab unfortunate soul that happens to be there. Sadly though, the only ones caught in it were the knights, as the 9 mages had avoided it in their own way. Azuma tried summoned out tendrils of roots to bind him, but all of them were destroyed before they could even touch him. Rusty Rose quickly summoned out a hail of spears and fired them at him, while Silver used his magic and tries to freeze him frozen solid. All the blonde did when he saw coming was mentally creating a force field that made the spears shatter upon contact, while the ice just covered the whole thing, leaving Naruto unharmed as the FO exploded outwards, turning the ice-covered protection into shards of projectiles that went shooting out in every direction. Only 7 of them actually dodged it, while with the last 2 just took it with stride as the shards bounce off one of them while passing through the other one as though like a mist. Naruto barely even looked as he raised one of his arms up to block a flaming axe kick by Zankro while lifting his leg high enough to block a roundhouse B, then grabbed Zankro with his hand while spinning on the balls of his heel and turned the blonde fire god slayer into a bat which swatted Silver aside like he was no. It was then though a shadow started growing bigger and bigger right under the Sorcerer Supreme, but the look on his face said it all as the body of Kane Hikaru sus mere inches from his head. The bloated man only had a fraction of a second to blink before he was hurled like a stone right into Franmath, who could only take it. He like Timber Keys summoned out a horde of undead and unleashed them upon the blonde sorcerer, while Zankro got back into the action as he shouted out, "Fire gods bellow!" firing off a torrent of black flames right at him, with Azuma using his attack as he called out, "Believe," with an explosive fireworks right at his left, while Jackal was on his magic to fire off a chain off explosions heading towards him. The rest weren't left out of it as Rusty Rose used his Ghosts of Britia to bind his entire body, while Zoldio summoned out an archer to fire at him. Kane fired out a lig his hand, while Silver fired out his attack in the form of a roar like Zankro did, but his was purple in color. And lastly was Franmath as he stretched out his limbs to run Naruto to help in binding him, but also absorbing his magic and soul. All of the attacks struck him dead on, and from there were a fiery explosion that could be seen from a mile as it nearly destroyed the area they were in. The explosio bit before it then slowly died down. All of the 9 vanguards could see nothing as the smoke was too much after their joint effort in hopes of killing the Sorcerer Supreme. After a while nothing happened. Zankro voiced out, "Ha, Sorcerer Supreme my ass, he was probably just all hype anyways, what a bore." he would have continued on talking, but the next words that came out of his mouth was a choke as a trail of small blood flowed out of his mouth. Most of the people stare on in shock, but even more so was the blonde fire god slayer as he then started to choke and cough blood non-stop before he looked down to see a blood-red spee of his chest. The blonde could only look on as his arms shakily went to touch it, as though that it was nothing but an illusion. Sadly though it was not the case, as he felt the spee from his body, making him slump to his knees as the wound continues to bleed profusely. It was then he saw someone walking from the corner of his eye. There he saw the Sorcerer Supreme, unharmed and calmly walking past him with the spear resting shoulders as he stared on at the remaining mages there. Despite that, Naruto still manages to turn just enough that Zenkro could see his face, but all he saw was the impassive look he had on his face as Naruto said to him, "You're a joke, I've seen, met, and fought against real god slayers and you aren't even a speck compared to actually surprised that you could be an S-ranked threat, a low one, but still. Sorry to say little boy, but the moment you took this job was the moment you signed your deal." Naruto then turned back and started to walk towards the remaining 8 of the vanguards, leaving Zenkro still kneeling before him, but not before Naruto had the law. He said, "By the way, send my regards to Lady Death if you see her in the void." That was the last thing Zenkro heard him say before he was decapitated by a blade that appeared from his own shadow. The remaining 8 stood ready before T Supreme, and from there Azuma had to quipped out, "I see that the rumors of you being merciless is true after all." Naruto just closed his eyes for a moment while answering him, "We walk a fine line between life and death. It doesn't matter who we are, mages, sorcerers, witches, us, we won't know how death comes for us, be it from our experimentation with our arts to beings from every dimension known and unknown in the mystic world, or rival mystic users wanting to find the secrets to our specific arts." The spear then disappeared in a burst of light, blinding them just slightly before it was completely gone, while Naruto just calmly put both his hands behind his back. T slowly opened his eyes, showing no emotion in them as he looks on at the 8 and continued on talking, "To me it's no different than what I have normally been do that tries to hurt my precious people. I'll admit that I might be more lenient when going out with the Avengers or X-Men, as only few of them could understand my scene it, but when it comes to this world, this moonlit world of never-ending tales, this is where I will bare my fangs to my enemies, where they will tremble in fear my name and cower before me, because this is my road, my life in a world where everything is twisted beyond anyone's imagination. So you tell me, Azuma." He then started to walk towards them with no fear in his step as he coldly ended his speech, "Are you ready to walk alongside death itself?" That was enough for everyone to start round 2 as Azuma and Jackal fired off a chain of explosions towards him. It was for naught though as the blonde dispelled T-wave of his hand, but the attack didn't stop there as Zoldio and Keys charged straight at him with Rusty Rose covering them by creating 2 giant walls with spikes would be in between them before making the walls slam into him. It would have been done so if Naruto didn't have a force field up that when the walls collided it simply destroyed itself. That wasn't what he wasn't going for though, as to reach Naruto first and tried to cover the blonde in hopes that his magical barrier particles could affect him somehow. What he wasn't expecting was for the blonde to conjure out a sword made of light itself and took a swipe at him with it. He thought that his magical barrier particles to let the attack pass by him harmlessly, but he was in for a rude surprise as the blade not only manages to cut him but it was enough to make him feel real pain as course and fell to the ground behind Naruto. Zoldio tried to punch him but all he got was a knee to the chin before an axe kick slam right into his head which had enough force to bury his head to the ground. Though Franmalth appeared right behind the Sorcerer Supreme as he used his arms to wrap around his body frame. The monster had a sick smile on his face as he laughed at the blonde's current predicament. "Ha ha ha, now that I've got you, let's see just how much magic I can take from you, which was then he started to absorb because of his position. Franmalth failed to notice that despite his current predicament Naruto showed no sense of urgency at all, which Silver noticed, but before he see his comrade though was when Naruto spoke out. "You want my power so badly." The way he said that confused the round monster, but then his eyes widened as he felt T-magic power slowly rising to the point that he thought seemed impossible for one to have this much reserve in his body. Seeing that it wasn't going good, Silver, Kane and Azuma charged right in to help, but it was then though the ground beneath them exploded outwards as giant roots started to attack them. It was enough to get them away from interrupting him as he continues to pour his magical energy for Franmalth to absorb. Franmalth tried to disentangle himself from the blonde sorcerer, but it was not enough as the blonde quickly appeared right in his face as his hand went and grabbed him a vice lock. If that wasn't enough, he slammed the monster's body down to the ground with an audible crack that made a spider web beneath them. It was then, though forcefully fed so to speak of Naruto's magic energy, the blonde didn't care as he continues to pour his energy for Franmalth to absorb, which was when the round arm realized just how much power the Sorcerer Supreme had and just how potent his magical energy was as his body showed signs of not being to handle. The strain keys tried to sneak attack the blonde, but he was then attacked by a pack of wolves that emerged from the shadows, this time though he didn't let his magic do the tries to avoid the pack that was now hunting him down. Franmalth knew that he wasn't going to get help anytime soon as his body groans and spiked as the magical energy from Naruto kept on pouring into him like a Wa had managed to use his powers to freeze all of the roots and tendrils, but at the cost of his reserves as he took in knee and panted harshly from it. That was enough for Azuma to try and attack the blonde with his own tree magic as he summoned the branches from the nearby trees to attack him with cane and are backing him up as the bloated man fired a hail of light shots while Rusty Rose summoned forth a hail of arrows the size of a truck towards him. Naruto didn't even be the attack as he raised his free hand up, palm towards the attack, and before anyone knew it every attack that was sent towards him simply crashed so to speak as were suddenly destroyed. But that didn't stop there as Naruto's magic continues forth towards the group who had to jump out of the way to avoid it. Even then he didn't let up on his grip on Franmalth as the monster slowly grew in size due to the amount of magic being forced into him. His body could not take any. His size went disproportionate to his body as it kept on growing in size until it slowly reaches its peak. It was then though Zoldio called out a horde of samurai to attack while Keys manages to summon out his own knights to attack him. Despite even that, Naruto did seem phased at all as he blasted them all away with a giant burst of his magic powers. The gathered army were swept aside like a leaf in a hurricane. It was then though the Franmalth reached his end as his body started to glow and convulse violently, and as soon as he was about to explode, Naruto hurled his bod fray of the remaining seven, and there the rounded monster exploded with a fury as the potency and amount was enough to level the entire area they were in and spread as far as it could, which was close to a mile. When it was said and done though, as the explosion died down, was Naruto standing tall without so much as a scratch on him while he looks on at the destruction. He couldn't care for much as he frowned slightly when he felt 7 magical signatures around him when suddenly silver burst from the ground in front of him and devil hidden art, eternal damnation, pouring every ounce of his magical reserves. He fired off a giant wave of ice that completely freezes the entire area where the two stood as the ice was unyielding of the entire area in its wake. After that attack did its job was when Silver collapsed to his knees and was now trying to breathe normally as his breathing went ragged and non-stop as long as possible. He also couldn't help but grin as he knew that attack was beyond what a normal person would survive, and even a demon would be hard-pressed to survive. Something was then though he looks just enough to see a pair of black shoes right before him. His eyes only widened just enough before one of the feet kicked him right in the sea, was enough to send the Ice Devil Slayer flying back into the air for a few feet before landing on the now cold hard ice-covered ground. He groaned for a bit as he manages to look up to see the Sorcerer Supreme in all his glory as the mists slowly disperse around him in a way that enhances his image. It was then the 6 appeared from above and fired of their magic right at him en masse, but all of them were destroyed before they could even touch him as a giant sent everyone there flying back, skidding across the now frozen wasteland. He then locks on to his next target as he saw Zoldio trying to slowly get back up. Naruto was by no means a vengeful man unless you hurt the people he cares about. How this person had taken over the bodies of others and forced them to do his bidding sickened him to no end. As he stalked right towards him, he could feel the 5 others also trying to get up and interfere with this fight, but he wasn't going to let that happen anytime soon. As he waved his arms in a circular started chanting, Neil wield Mayan Terce El Cantias. He then put his hands out to the sky and shouted out, August Regulus. From behind the Sorcerer Supreme erupted a pillar of light that broke the very earth itself as the surrounding mages there shielded their eyes from its light. It then down just enough for all of them to look on and see something standing behind the sorcerer. What stood behind him was something that was humanoid in appearance. aside from the markings on his body as well as his eyes and arms. His hair is white and him have a wild look and his skin is of tanned complexion. His eyes glow white and although he has irises, he doesn't have pupils. The humanoid has intricate mark symbols on his body which portrays him as a savage warrior. He wears a pair of silver intricately decorated gauntlets on his arms and his sword is sheathed horizon waist. He wears baggy white pants with remnants of armor and a torn white sash attached to them. All in all, it looked like an embodiment of war was behind the blonde and its eyes were locked onto the remaining 5 that were now having a cold shiver down their humanoid then leapt into battle right at them. Seeing that he was not going to survive this, Zoldio decided to do what anyone in his position would do. He ran by quickly summoning a teleportation circle. The possessed celestial spirit ran off into anywhere if only just to get away from the blonde. It worked though, as he summoned himself far away from the blonde in a remote area of Japan where he was about on the edge of the country, which was what his remaining powers had taken. He panted harshly as he knew that the amount of magic he put in that jump was all the reserves he could muster in hopes of getting away from that monster. He his breathing down properly as he shakily got up to his feet and wondered if he was home free, but it was then though a playful voice said out to him, "Oh, I don't think that you are going to be let off that easily, you naive little fool." His eyes only widened for a fraction of a second before he was suddenly engulfed in a bright light and then he was gone once again. Back to the battlefield there Naruto shake his head as his summons crossed his arms on his chest while the two look on in the now barren field where moments ago everyone there was saved by an unk, which wasn't much of a surprise for the blonde. He waves his hand for a moment which made his summons disappear for now as he tries to locate Zoldio, who ran off first. But when he did though was when he faced signature from behind him and it was there he turned to see Zoldio being dropped face first onto the ground right in front of him as a second person walked out of the person that walked out of there was a seemingly tall, voluptuous woman with large amounts of scarlet hair thickly braided and located in the front and back of pairs, all of which have bows near its ends. The frontal braids also have 2 golden ornaments near the upper sections. Also, the woman has 2 U-shaped earrings while donning a light red lipstick. For her clothing, she dons a scanty version of the typical witch's garb. Her black top has a diamond-shaped opening, exposing a portion of her breasts, and a heart around the borders. It extends down to the navel of her stomach where it meets a large angular scar, is draped over by a dark-colored cape with a light-colored medallion gold-like ornaments, and is held together by a golden chain. Not left bare, too, her neck is decorated by other small cloth-based accessories, including additionally, she wears an elongated black loincloth with a symbol emblazoned on its front, having white borders on its edges and being connected to another cloth very same heart-shaped design. She also wears black thigh-high boots with heels that have a white-colored border near the top and gloves of the same color and having claw-like extensions. Her black witch's hat is much larger than her head and possesses dreadlock designs with white bandaging near its ends. It also has its edges. All in all, she was someone that would turn any hot-blooded male's heads. As she walked towards Naruto with a sway of her hips, she stopped right next to him before arms around his as she said to him with a slight purr, "Good to see you again, master." The blonde only sigh as he says to her, "Good to see you too, Irene. I see that you managed to get the hang of using the Universe 1 if you managed to teleport this edge of Japan right in front of me." The now named Irene pouted slightly as she recalls the time she used the teleportation of Universe 1 where it ended badly for said recipient. It was then though his gaze was now on the quivering mess of one Zoldio, which in hindsight was kind of funny because his current body was far more intimidating appearance-wise. Was have a small smile on her face as she saw Naruto lifting the possessed celestial spirit up with his free hand. The man pleaded and begged to be spared, but Naruto was having none of that as he fired a concentrated shot of magic right into his chest, and from there Zoldio W expelled from Capricorn, as Zoldio in his true form was now nothing more than a spirit. But it didn't end there just yet, as Naruto split the earth under Zoldio with a foot, and from there the spirit-like man could scream in terror as he was grabbed by hordes of beings called Froth from hell itself as he was slowly dragged into the last thing should any else were there to hear were the screams of Zoldio before the earth closed around him, never to be heard nor seen for all eternity. After that the red head could see that Capricorn slowly disappear into small particles of light and There in its place now was a golden key with the sign of Capricorn, the key being levitated before it went into the blonde's hands. Curious, she decides to ask him, "Are you going to keep that?" He turned to look at her for a bit before he shrugged and answered her, "Maybe. Celestial keys are pretty rare, especially the golden ones, but if there's someone else better suited for it, then I don't mind handing it over, provided they prove themselves, of course." She could tell that he meant what he said, and she couldn't help but pity the person that might one day challenge him so he or she could get the key, but she wasn't that, as she looks on in a direction to see a giant demon a few ways away from the two. She couldn't care much about it, but she did voice out though, "Aren't we moving master?" just so that the demon over there wouldn't kill the students. Naruto took one good look at the demon for a few moments and using his sensory abilities for a bit, and after a while he just said to her, "No need, they got this. Han experience like this will do wonders for the newbies, so how about we take a nice long walk? It is a nice night out tonight and I would love to hear what one of my to these past few years." Irene couldn't help but have a warm smile on her face as she snuggled a little deeper into Naruto's arm as the two slowly walk towards their destination, all the while about what she was doing these past years under the moonlit sky.